taking the minutes. I have one ad just under the committee reports that I'm just going to add a quick discussion about the Sustainability Council.
Christine, what?
I'm adding an agenda item under the committee reports. I'm just going to add also the Sustainability Council.
Thank
A little
you.
nomenclature. I asked for.
If you could recommend that people speak up, it would be great.
I will do my best. So, welcome. There's an attendance sheet going around. If you could all sign in, it's a requirement statute that you write your name and your place of residence. And if somebody could help that get back to Tim at the end of the aisle there, that would be very helpful. If you need a bathroom, it's out the door to the right and to the left. We will have public comment. We generally recognize public comment for items that are not specifically on the agenda. Under item 2, recognition of individuals and public comment. If you're commenting on an agenda item, we will give an opportunity for the public to speak to the item, or against the item, I guess, before the board votes. Public comment is extremely important. It's important that it's addressed to the chair. I am the chair. So don't direct your comments to individual board members. I may phone a friend. I may ask a board member to help me answer a question, but it's not to be addressed to a board member. Obviously, we keep all of our communications respectful to the board. I may have to limit the time on an item that anyone can speak, so before you raise your hand to speak, I will ask how many people want to speak to an item if I feel like there's going to be a lot of comment, and I may say you're going to limit your time to 1 minute, 2 minutes, and Sean has agreed to be the timekeeper if we move to that, because we have lots of things. We have to make sure that children in Head Start get funded with federal dollars. We have to make sure we have policies in place for the start of the school year, and half of this board has already been in a meeting for an hour, and so when it gets to around 10 o'clock, we are not an effectively operating board. So we want to make sure we include everybody's voice at the table. So with that in mind, I am going to recognize our visitors tonight and ask if there is public comment for something that is not on the agenda. So I've got 3 people, so I think we can give everybody 2 minutes on that. And I saw Jody's hand first. So if you could please state your name and your town. That was a request last time. Your name and the town before you speak.
Jody Normando, Dummerston. I just heard that the Y had sent letters to some of the boards not having an after-school program, and I don't know if this board had heard that, and if there is an issue that you need to deal with.
This board has just heard about that. Many of us, because we are coming here to this meeting, by the time we get the email, we're already in meetings, so everybody has been forwarded a letter about this, and we may have an opportunity to take that up under this other business, but there can't be any action on it or any discussion, but half the board has just heard this, and I think it was just new information.
Hi, Ruby McAdoo from Putney. So my thing to say is about Wisefire, and I'm the one who wrote you the letter. And so I just want to be really clear that there are 14 families that are flipping out right now. And I realize that that's an administrative role that we're going to Herb, and he's working with us, and we're trying to figure it out. We're not putting all of our responsibilities of childcare on you, but what we would like you to recognize and would like you to consider at some later date is that we see this as an issue of equity. And what I understand, and unless something's changed in Guilford, because that's the only one I couldn't quite get a read on, Wisefire offers programming, aftercare programming, in all of the surrounding towns. And at this point, we have 19 kids who have nowhere to go in the aftercare portion of the day. And we have very robust aftercare programming, like the forest program and things like that, but we have kindergartners and first graders who aren't eligible for that. And so it's very important to me, I have 2 kids that are in that program, that the board recognizes that there is some amount that at the board level could be done to reach out to Wisefire, to engage with them on what happened. Because what happened was really unacceptable. from the opinion of all of the parents who are flipping out. And so I don't expect that there will be much discussion now, but I want to raise it because we are activated at this point and trying to make a plan. But I want this to be a sustainable program, and I would like for there to be some level of equity along the lines of each, after carrying each of the surrounding towns in our district being available at all. So, and that's essentially, that's kind of the undercurrent of what was in my letter, and hopefully if you have any questions, you're welcome to engage with me, and I have a group of parents that, that are kind of leading the charge.
Thank you, Ruby, and thank you for mentioning that you're speaking to Herb about it and working within the building, because the board really does not want to micromanage everything that happens in all of our buildings. Thank you. So I have a request from BCTV that when you make a comment that you stand so that you can be heard and be seen by all of our viewing audience. Yes?
Hi, my name is Jana Zeller. I am from Brattleboro, and I'm here for my son Django Grace, who has a show at NEYT tonight. And I believe his letter relates to the Sustainability Council. Dear Chair, my name is Django Grace. Unfortunately, I am not able to be here tonight, but I still would like my voice heard. When I heard there was going to be a climate subcommittee on the school board, I decided I want to join it. I think that as a student, activist, and just a person that cares about the future, this would be a great way to serve and improve my community. I have been to both public and private school, and so far I have seen only a minimal amount of education about the current climate disaster. Brattleboro, we can do better. My long-term goal on this committee is to make a climate curriculum to be instituted here in Brattleboro. Currently, I go to Hilltop Montessori School, and next year they are starting a climate curriculum in the middle school. As a student learning from this kind of climate curriculum, I think I could provide valuable insight and bring experience to the table on this committee. As a youth who also just cares about the future and my community, I think I will prove to be a valuable asset to this committee. Being a local activist, people often tell me I am preaching to the choir here in Brattleboro. Well, there is no choir. We all need to act now. You are educating the generation that is really going to be affected by climate change, and it is up to us whether we are going to be armed with knowledge going into this battle. I want to bring knowledge of this issue to the youth of Brattleboro, including myself. Going into Brattleboro Union High School, I want to know that what I'm learning is going to make a difference. When I am on this committee, I'm going to make sure that this is true for my peers and me. So thank you for listening to my thoughts. I don't know if getting onto this panel will be like an election, but if so, consider me a viable candidate. Thanks, Django Sydney Grace.
Thank you. Speak for all, we're looking forward to having your son at the UHS. It sounds like
He has one more year at Hilltop, and then he'll be there.
is there any other?
Madam Chairwoman, would you please oblige us by reading the agenda?
The entire agenda.
Or the item subjects?
So at the beginning, I limited public comment to 2 minutes per person, and it will take me 2 minutes to read that. Is there a specific item you're interested in?
I wanted to know particularly if the climate, how the board will substitute the climate crisis agenda requirement without the presence or the empanelment of the committee.
So I have added that as the first item of business on the agenda because it was not put on there by mistake because I said committee and that was a miscommunication with the problems of the English language. That has been added to the last of the committee reports.
Thank you.
Am I supposed to
stand too?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Jamie Comtois from Putney, and I didn't raise my hand earlier because I thought it was on the agenda, but the board representation, and so a couple of us had come to just articulate that. So am I missing it? Because I just reviewed the agenda and I don't see it.
That's coming under the Policy and Amendment Committee.
Perfect. So that will be addressed in the
That will
agenda?
be addressed.
Okay. Thank you.
Moving right along to communications, I had sent backup materials to the full board yesterday afternoon. The board received that, and I sent 2 emails today from Ruby McAdoo, as she mentioned, so just making sure everybody got that. Anybody else have communications?
Communications meeting.
You know what, I just skipped over the clerk's report, sorry.
And approval of the minutes, right?
Approval of the minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I was just, I went whoops, but let me go back to that in a second. I can go back.
Christina?
Yes.
It's a long way over here.
Sorry.
So if you could speak, I didn't hear any of that.
Oh, okay. Boy, this is a tough room.
It is, it's a very difficult room.
Okay,
It's meant to be shouting from the stage.
going on hour 11 here of chatting, so I'll do my best. So let me go back and do the clerk's report. I would entertain a motion for the approval of minutes of July 24th, 2019.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Emily. Is there any discussion about the minutes of July 24th? All those in favor of approval of the minutes of July 24th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay, thank you. Tim abstaining. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Communications. I sent everybody board backup with reports yesterday, and 2 letters today, this afternoon from Ruby McAdoo, so just making sure those have all gotten to board members. Are there any other communications that involve board business that should be brought to the attention of the board?
Late today, I got 2 about artificial turf.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody else had time to look at those or not. And I sent one around with the draft policy committee minutes from yesterday. I hope everybody got that.
Okay, moving right along. We're making good time tonight. Finances. Oh, yeah.
The Finance Committee met at 5 o'clock this evening.
Well, it's not a committee report, it's just a motion. This is not good. Okay.
All right.
Why don't we do a finance committee report here and
Oh,
then
I thought
approve the
that's what
finance?
it was.
Well, it's just approval of the warrants, but the warrants need a little change that we go through.
What was that number?
Do you have the warrants, Frank?
171, 617,
617.
0.51.
Okay.
I would entertain a motion to approve the warrants. No,
Usually what we do is,
you do the finance committee recommendation first, and then I'll take the motion. Okay?
usually what we did at District 6 was to read all of the warrants and then this, so everybody understands what we did.
Do you want to do that then?
Sure.
Okay.
The Finance Committee met at 5 o'clock tonight, this afternoon, and we approved warrants number 1001, 1005, 1008, 1010, 1020, 1024 in the amount of $21,319.74. We also approved warrants 114 through 119 and 127, 128, 129, and 130 in the amount of $171,617.51. We also approved payrolls for July 3rd in the amount of $278,096.31. July 19th, $321,503.31. August 2nd, $358,969.49 for a total of $958,569.01.
Do I have a second on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you explain what the differentials are when I look at July 3rd, 278,096, and then I look at August 2nd, 358,969?
Can I get a second so we can discuss it? That was a point of
Oh,
order, so I'm happy to
okay.
do that. Can I get the second, and then I will, one of us absolutely will address that.
Second.
Board member.
Yes.
But thank you. Thank you, Emily. All right. So is there any board discussion? And maybe Sean, do you want to explain the difference between the warrant amount and the, or do you want me to handle
Well, I don't think that's what the question was. It was about payroll.
It's the payroll question,
Oh.
what the huge differential is from July 2nd, July 3rd, and
Oh.
August 2nd.
If it pleases the board, I would defer the answer to that to
That's fine.
Frank.
Sure. So the July 3rd represents the end of a school period, because payroll is run on a Friday for the prior 2-week period ending. So it reflects a fair amount of employment where there's much lighter duty for service that after school is out. But then as we get into mid-July and in August, many of our services are back online, custodial, some of our athletic programs, and certainly most of our administrative staff. So that reflects differences in what's going on in the schools, close of school versus getting things started again.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I had a question about, well, a clarification and a question about one of the items. On page 46 of 80, or it's page 11 of the last of the large bundles in there, there's an item to Granite City Electric for $2,600, and the description is encumber funds as needed for the 2019-2020 school year. And the way this, I understand this is, these things are supposed to state, according to the law, state definitively the purpose for which they are drawn and shall be payable to the party entitled. And encumbering them for a school year doesn't seem, it's not specific enough. And I'm curious why we do it that way and how can we get it more detailed.
Well, there's certainly a detailed invoice for each transaction. The reference you're making, though, is for a vendor that we know that has been routinely engaged, and this has been common practice on the Brattleboro Town Board as well, so it's nothing new. But what it allows is the Granite State Electric would be associated with maintenance work over the summer, and when we have a purchase order that's approved, it allows work to be provisioned as needed.
So it's like we have an account
Yeah.
and we spend it down and then
Yes.
we encumber some more.
Yeah, we have budget control for that that line item, and there is a review process, of course, for primarily at the principal level that monitors, well, what is being purchased and is there funding available?
So this is all for non-technology repair and maintenance, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other one is just a clarification. I'm curious because I haven't done a high school budget before. There's $8,000 in there for the digital high school, for seats at the digital high school. I don't know, the principal's here, maybe you could tell us something about
For
this?
virtual high school?
Yes.
Yeah, we're part of the virtual high school consortium.
Virtual, thank you.
Yeah, so we pay $8,000 to go on to that consortium. In exchange, we're given 50 seats throughout the school year courses.
And what happens?
Students take them and pass them and do really well.
And get credit for
Yep.
taking things, these
Yep.
are online courses?
Yep, they're courses that are offered within the school. Yeah. Thanks.
Madam Chair, excuse me. It would be very helpful for us in the back if people would stand to speak and speak up.
discussion?
you.
Any other questions on the warrants? All those in favor of the motion to approve the warrants and payroll, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The warrants are passed. Moving on to committee reports. Finance Committee.
Yeah, I just gave the Finance Committee, we did have a meeting tonight, as I said, and we discussed a number of things in terms of procedure, how the procedure would be changed from the individual districts, and
Speak up, please.
I got my hearing aids in, it's plenty loud for me.
It's not from us.
Anyway, the difference is the difference between Putney, Dummerston, Guilford, and Brattleboro Town, and District 6, and so how are we going to meld this all into a system that works in terms of finances? So we had a pretty brisk discussion about it, and I think there is a solution in the offing as we go forward, but there are ways to work things out. That's basically what we did, other than talk about payrolls and warrants.
About travel, the sustainability travel. Sustainability travel.
I know. Yeah.
Definitely can't hear that.
I'm just we don't have minutes yet to work off. It's very hard to have a 5 o'clock meeting and do a 6 o'clock report. So just trying to put that all together. No?
I just
Okay. With the agenda, I sent out the list of committee reports, by the way, with some action items making people conveners. Thank you, David Scholes, for that suggestion. So if your committee has not convened and you've risen to the top of the heap, then you are responsible for convening your committee before our next meeting, having an organizational meeting, finding a chair to that meeting, because I've made you a convener does not make you the chair. So your committee will determine a committee chair that will be responsible for giving the reports unless you are absent, calling meetings, setting agendas, and making sure the minutes get taken and posted. And since there were no personnel committee meetings warned, I'm going to assume, or minutes, I'm going to assume that we have not had a personnel committee meeting thus far. So we'll move on from that action item, but you have now been sent it by email, and you've been reminded to get your committee started. Moving on to the Policy and Amendment Committee. We have met a couple of times on several things. The first item of note that we met on this week was the facility and building use policy. There has been a lot of concern about our policy and that it seemed that we were embracing groups that engage in hate speech. Lyle has spoken with the attorney. We have looked at our policy carefully. We've looked at how the process, it is a group that has used the church. They went through the procedures to use a school building. The laws, the federal laws, and we have to comply with federal laws if we're going to take federal funds for education. So if we're going to continue to fund Title I and Medicaid and take any federal dollars, then we need to comply with federal law. And federal law, several federal laws work together, and case law requires that school boards cannot discriminate if they allow the public to use school facilities. They cannot discriminate on the basis of gender, religious beliefs, perceived minority status, there's the whole list of things that you cannot discriminate. So unless a group is actively targeting and a known hate group, we cannot forbid the use of our public spaces, school buildings, to one group versus another, even if the majority, the whole entire board disagrees with the viewpoint of an organization. So the policy committee has looked at that and said, well, we have two choices. we can not allow schools to be used by any non-school related groups, and then we don't have to put ourselves in these decisions. That's one option. So that's the first decision point. And we had a discussion about that. I'm very concerned because we have lots of groups. Our school buildings are an incredible resource for our communities. I know we have Special Olympics practice both at the high school and at Dummerston. We have Girls on the Run. I don't have the list with me. I'm not prepared for this. Oh, thank you, Steve.
That's just high school.
And from the high school, thank you. I have it somewhere. The Community Forum for a Hate-Free Vermont, the Brattleboro Police Department, summer youth programs from the Vermont Department of Labor. So if we're going to say no to one group, we have to say no by law. The attorney was crystal clear on this, and we went back to him several times. The attorney was very clear. If we're going to say no to a church, we have to say no to the BUHS Booster Club, Brattleboro Park and Rec, the annual town meeting. So I am bringing that to the full board as our first decision point to bring the recommendation back if you want us to consider changing our policy that local communities can't use our schools, or if we go forward and work on our policy. Let me just add to the conversation that it was brought to me by a former Brattleboro board member that we could perhaps add language on advertising that made it clear, just like we do on handouts, that the school, by using our facilities, the school board and the school district does not endorse the views and the policies of the group using it. And so I looked through several policies. Stowe, for example, has that all promotional materials will carry that warning, just as handouts that come home with school children come home with that disclaimer. So the other option, if we decide to keep using our school buildings and keeping them open for public access, we could require that anybody using it has this comment adjacent to saying, if it's going to be an academy school, adjacent to that is a statement, the font size is no less than 50% of the font size of academy school, and says the school board does not endorse, use of the school facilities does not endorse school board support for the policies of this group. So that it would be very clear to the public that we are opening the doors. I think there's a further, in my experience as an educator, there's another really important reason for our children and our immediate school children that we make the school a welcoming place. Is I had a lot of parents that really had a hard time coming into a school building. They had not had success in their school years, and by making the school buildings a part of the community and a welcoming place, it makes parents more at ease to come into the school building when they have open houses, parent-teacher conferences, and it's something that we really want to have as much participation in our schools as possible. So while I feel very strongly that they're important community resources, I think that there's also a good reason to have citizens coming in and out of our schools and being comfortable in them. But with that, I turn it over to the board for discussion as to where, I don't really want to have a motion on the table, maybe a hard motion to make, but just to have a quick weigh-in discussion about which direction the board would prefer to go.
Excuse me, is there going to be public input on this?
There will be.
Okay.
The board generally has their discussion
Okay.
before voting. I will take public opinion. Yes.
I read the information that was sent around from the Stowe board, and one of the items that they included in that was that insurance had to be covered by the group that came to a school, so that if there was any problem after the event, that it would be covered by insurance and it wouldn't come back onto the school. So that probably is done already, but
I think we'll be looking at the nitty-gritty of our policy but this was such a big issue and such a big change. I think we have to harmonize all the school policies or decide when they're not harmonized. But this was an issue that has come up. There's a previous policy. It was used by a group approved in the legacy district. But it's a way that we can improve our communications and make it more clear what the relationship is between the school building and the school district. Any thoughts on the direction? Do we keep the buildings accessible and provide a statement, or do we close our doors to public use?
I mean, I like the idea of keeping them open to public use, but having a disclaimer that makes it really clear that, you know, the schools do not endorse this group. I think it's also clear that, just from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be all nonprofit groups, and obviously if they did have something that rose to the level by law of hate speech, we would not be supporting them. Unfortunately, the law sometimes is unclear of what constitutes that kind of, I guess, reaches the barrier, and some people might think it's the barrier and then it's not legally the barrier. So we would all have to be okay with using the law as the guideline, because otherwise we would have to exclude all groups. So I like the idea of the disclaimer statement.
David?
Yeah, don't want to say too much because the policy committee talked about this yesterday, and that's pretty much the conclusion we came to. So I'd rather, if there's anyone on the board that doesn't think that's the way to move forward, we should probably hear from them. Otherwise, hear from the public and then move on.
Thank you. I'll open it up. Can I just see a show of hands of how many people want to speak to this particular item? 3, so 2 minutes each seems reasonable. So if you could just state your name, I think you came in after we started. If you could just state your name and your town and stand when you speak.
Yeah, Chris Alden, live in Brattleboro. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding what the concern has been. There's a very lengthy conversation on the Brattleboro, Vermont forum, 335 comments when I left my house a half an hour ago. The hate speech for now, let's put that aside. The concern is that one of the organizations that you allow to have space at Oak Grove was in essence teaching religious beliefs at an event that they had, a 3-night event geared towards children. That was the major concern, that shouldn't be part of a public school event. I understand that it wasn't part of the school, and I'm glad that you're going to put a disclaimer on, because that's the automatic take when you see that. It's like, oh my God, you know, like what? That particular organization, I don't know if there's any research done on organizations before they're allowed to have access or not, but if you go onto their website and read their beliefs, it is in fact hate speech. They are nullifying a complete group of our citizens by saying that they don't exist. It's certainly not anything that should be a part of any school. I pay taxes in Brattleboro, and I'm a lesbian, and I certainly don't want to fund having them teaching children about what an awful person I am, or the fact that transgender people don't exist. Lots of churches in this town have events. I've gone to a lot of them. Concerts, you know, book readings, holiday fairs, whatever. Not once have I ever seen anyone from the church reading Bible stories to children, nor has anyone ever come up to me and talked about what their church means, anything religious. It's a separate event. So I think what the bulk of the people that were commenting on the forum are asking is, my understanding from, I asked David to send me a copy of the contract that nonprofits use, and one of the things that it said is that the individual principals of the schools can determine what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and also whether they even want to have that organization there. Nobody's saying you shouldn't use school space for organizations. What we're saying is that religion should not be taught at those events, particularly a religion that picks and chooses what fits into a very discriminatory belief system. Is it not, you know, I would think that, I don't know the principal from Oak Grove, my grandson goes here.
Your 2 minutes is up. I'm sorry, we have a long agenda.
Okay, then you're all going to get emails from me, because this warrants way more discussion than this.
Well, I appreciate that, and so I will answer by saying that we have had lots of discussions at the board level about this, and we have brought actually that very website to the attorney, and that is the problem we're faced with, that we don't have a choice. If we're going to take federal dollars to educate our children, we do not have a choice. We can't say you can't hold religious events in a school if we allow any other nonprofit to do it. Unfortunately, that's the law. There's nothing, we have been back and forth.
I don't think that is the law, actually. I think that, not according to your own contract, it's not the law. It says that the principal can determine what's permissible and what isn't permissible. So what is stopping?
So, I'm sorry, I'm happy to answer that question. We can't have it back and forth because this will go on. And actually, it also says you cannot discriminate on the basis of race, creed. Our policy says that. So that would be a violation of the law. For principals saying you can't do something because of your sexual orientation or your religious beliefs, then the principal would be breaking the law and they'd be exposing our district to legal action.
Even though the organization itself is discriminating on those very issues.
So I'm happy to, please send a letter and you can have
You
2 minutes
betcha.
next time. Thank you.
Hi, Ruby McAdoo Putney. So I guess I had a question. I know nothing about this, and this is the first I'm really hearing of it. But as a member of the PTO in Putney, I just wanted to first ask: is a PTO an outside organization, or it's part of the school? Okay. And then the second question I had, which is really just in hearing this woman speak, and and all of you speak about this, I feel like there's a difference between actively, bringing religious propaganda on and having that be part of an event in our schools versus discriminating against someone. And so, I have Muslim kids. Would we be having the same question if it was some mosque that wanted to? Probably not, because it wouldn't happen. I can't see it happen, that a principal would allow it. It's a sad thing, but it's true. But you could solve this problem if you were to develop some policy that had language, I think, a lawyer would have to obviously help you with that, but that would spell out the types of things that are allowable within the school rather than the types of organizations that are allowed to come in. So that was just a thought that I had when I was hearing this.
Well, the initial response of the board was was like, let's just not have anything because we don't want to do this. And I could turn it over. So, in terms of the feeling on the board of what has happened, we worked very hard to try to find a way around this and went back and forth to the attorney because this is not our desire at all to have this kind of teaching. I can't speak for the board, but I'm pretty sure that we all, based on the committee, we were all very concerned that this group was using the school in a way that a lot of people in the community found offensive. That's concerning. I don't know the substance and the content, but I think I could turn it over, if it's okay with the board, that Lyle would because she had several discussions with the attorney. So, and we went back and forth on this. I spent a good 25 hours on this in the past week, so I don't take it lightly, and I've been trying to find creative ways around it and creative ways to make our community feel safe, but I'm not getting, we have to do what's legal too, and that's the problem that our board is finding itself in. So I'll turn it over to Lila, and she can maybe underscore the legal opinion that we have gotten.
In simplest terms, if we ban a group, we must ban all groups. And as the list was shown, that means anything that is not school-sponsored. The other thing we should point out is this was not a school-sponsored event. This was a group that went through the procedures and asked to use the facility. In the Brattleboro Town School District policy, it does say that authorization to use school facilities does not imply endorsement or approval of any group or activity. It was not Oak Grove students that were there unless their parents took them there because they are a part of that church. So again, we cannot ban any church, any religious group, any group at all, unless we're going to make sure that we're banning all groups.
Robin is next.
Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. What really resonated with me, what you said, Christina, about having the school's goal of making all parents and families and kids feel really comfortable and at ease at school. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with this group participating in an event that's held at a school, is that when families who do have gay people in their family or trans people in their family hear that this is being held at their school or in their school district, that does not make people feel comfortable at school. Now, recognizing that the laws are limiting the school's ability to pick and choose who comes there, I think that maybe one way of addressing that would just be to focus on the group that is being discriminated against by a participating group. So I know that in Brattleboro, we've been talking, when we had our own board, about making our schools more gender inclusive and making families feel welcome there. And I just wonder if one of the ways of combating this discomfort that people would have with a group like that is making that support for all genders and sexualities more visible in the school and outside the school. So you might have a rainbow flag or a trans flag, flying on the playground, and that way we would be undercutting any messages that might come from the groups that are holding events, and also that could just help to support our goal of making students feel welcomed in the first place, and perhaps make the school a less appealing place for discriminatory groups to want to hold their events.
Okay. One of the things that I thought about when I first heard about this was that I sort of have a tenet that church and state should be separate. And so I sort of think about it in context of a school. You don't have religious fervor coming into a school very often. I mean, it's not done. Everybody has to be treated equally, regardless of how they feel about religion and any higher power or not. When my daughter was at BUHS, she was the editor of the Extempore, and when she was home last week, she showed me a piece that she'd written, and she didn't believe in God, and she stated it right there. And so I think it's important not to have groups come. I know that the legal doesn't agree with this, the legal statements, but I personally believe that there should be a way to find not to have religion come directly to a school, regardless of what the religion is.
So I did ask at the beginning if you wanted to comment. I'm going to give you, if it's okay with the board, I'm going to give you 1 minute of comment time, so choose your words carefully because we have a long agenda. So, Laura, I think I saw you first.
I just have a really quick question.
Name and...
Sorry, I'm supposed to stand up too. Laura Chapman, sorry. And my question is, if a group holds an event in a school, is anybody allowed to show up to that event, or do they have to be invited? Is it open to the public if it is taking place in a school? I'd be really interested in the answer to that question, because in that case, I feel like if people really do take issue, they can come and ask questions too. There's maybe a little bit more nuance that could happen.
I would suggest we might want to consider that in our policy discussion. If we want any kind of statement that if it's being held in a public school, then it is open to public.
I mean, certainly the grounds outside, if you want to peacefully demonstrate, the grounds outside are available to protest the views of an organization using a public space. So I would say yes, but if it's indoors, we have to consider that in our policy. That's
I think that it would have to be everybody's welcome, but that's just my opinion.
But you have to do, we have to, it's the paperwork. we have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you ask the attorney?
Sorry, Liz, could you stand and take a name?
Liz Adams from Putney. Did you ask the attorney what rises to the level of hate speech so that we know?
The example he gave was neo-Nazis, people that are already, it's already been determined that they are hate groups. I sent the attorney the website from this particular church. He reviewed it and said it did not rise to hate speech.
So, but if someone from the public, like, let's say I went to one of their church meetings and I heard hate speech going on, does that give this board leeway?
I would bring it to the board. The board would probably have to take that specifically to the attorney.
I mean,
I'm not an attorney. I am only passing on the information. I do not know. I do not know.
I think Jody has a.
Jody Normando, Darmiston. My question is, do you charge? And if you charge, can you have a scale of charging? You know, for nonprofits or cultural groups or, you know, something like that. And I'm wondering if you can do that.
I'm not an attorney, but I would suppose that, while I applaud your creativity, I would suppose that that would be discrimination because in other parts of our country, they would charge twice as much for an LGBTQ group as they would for a church group. And so the law works both ways. It's a federal law. And so I'm pretty sure that, just as a guess, I'm not an attorney, that we cannot write a policy. That policy would be subject to litigation, which takes money out of our schools. So I wouldn't be inclined to write a policy that an attorney recommended against because we will have to litigate it then. So.
There is a fee scale, but it's broader than that. So if it's, for instance, a district school, then we don't charge. If it's a nonprofit, then we don't charge. But if it's an outside Brattleboro nonprofit, then we would probably charge for any custodial or security that needed to be in the building at that time. So it depends on the type. If it's a profit, a nonprofit, a school, or whatever.
I think she meant hate speech dollar for hate speech ordered.
So, oh, sorry, Emily.
Just a quick question. So after a group applies and we deem them as, you know, or according to the current policy that they can rent the space, that they fit the criteria that we are currently have, can we control what they do or say in the space? Like, are there any guidelines we give them that I guess could say, like, could directly be teaching religion? Like, we could have a policy that ensures that it goes along with beliefs. I don't know how deep we can get into it, but I mean, maybe it could be broad enough where we wouldn't get into trouble, but it would say, like, we're a gender inclusive environment, we're this, we're... Yeah. So the hope would be is that they would...
I suspect not, if you look at the case law.
I suspect not. Okay. So no guidelines.
We can, well, there is case law. It talks about when groups seek to teach morals have been permitted to use facilities. So there is some specific case law about using facilities for worship services, that type of thing.
Okay. So there might be a little we could do.
It's worth maybe having a follow-up conversation at the policy committee level on which you sit. So I can turn home. No, you're not doing it for finance.
I can help that one.
Okay, excellent. Kelly?
Maybe everyone else in the room understands exactly what went on or was anticipated to go on. And though they may hold some beliefs that many people in this room find offensive and against whatever their own beliefs are, I would hazard a guess that maybe some of their beliefs, if they were here, sitting here, that they would find some other things offensive that people in this room hold near and dear to their heart. So some of them may be taxpayers of any of the towns as well. So I think we need to be mindful of that. But it's not clear to me and I'm not trying to make light of the fact that some people are upset with or offended by their ideology. And I did look at their website and tried to get a somewhat of an understanding, but it's not clear whether something actually happened there that people are upset about, or it's just that what they think that this group represents, having used this space. So I guess if I could get some clarification on that, it would be appreciated.
I don't think we can possibly look into them. I don't think we.
Christina? I mean, did something happen at the event? Yes. Or is it just the item?
Yes, something happened at the event.
So I'm sorry, if you could just, if I could just keep things going a little bit. I know there was a variety of concerns. Was there anything specific that anybody has heard of that rose to a level of, not just the ideology of the church that they have written on their site, but was there something going on that was targeting people? And I guess maybe I'm wondering if that could be addressed via email to me, the chair, so we could take this up at a policy, because then we're putting a group that isn't here to answer, and it's getting to be 7 o'clock, so that we could do some investigating on our own, because the only thing that I have heard of is it was just the ideology. It was the ideology of the group, and that the school was being used for teaching religion, which, yes, Jamie.
So I'm Jamie Comtois in Putney, and to respond to your statement, Kelly, I wanted to say that as a queer woman and a mom, and also somebody who has been a part of Christian Bible study groups, that my experience is that the way it plays out is over the long term in lots of personal conversations that happen at Bible study. So whether it happened any particular day, it's a part of the culture of teaching that you are not a part of God's kingdom, that you are unholy, and that you need to be healed. And so that message comes at the LGBT community in a daily onslaught. And so I was amazed when I heard about this, because I was noticing my anxiety rising, what's happening in our nation. And I so appreciate that this body has upheld the values of equality. And one of my suggestions, not only to thank Robin Morgan for her suggestion, which I think was exceptional, and I would love to see that happen. I also wanted to suggest, as there's a communications committee of this group, that a statement is made to the values of this body, and that because this is a public situation, that if you cannot discriminate against any one group for their beliefs, that you uphold your own, and that it is through a public statement in response to this that you reiterate what the existing policies are of this body around equality. And I think that would be a wonderful way to be able to elevate what we stand for in a time when many people feel scared and shamed.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, Dave.
I wanted to sort of add on to something that Laura said about the messages and what to do about them. Our gut reaction when something's really offensive or really, seems really ugly is to just push it aside, bury it, cover it up, hide it. And we did that. We've done that for decades with all sorts of human rights activities, all the things that we now see surfacing and the kind of hate groups and the kind of activities that we see happening. When you don't engage with ideas that are contrary to yours or beliefs that are contrary to yours, you don't change them. Pushing them out of the school building, not letting them come in and be part of the public in the school building is not going to change them. It's not going to change their message or their beliefs. The only thing that's going to change that is to engage with them. And we've made that mistake over and over again. Rely on the courts, rely on the shaming of people. They don't go away. They don't change their minds. They just blow up and have marches in places like Virginia where people get killed. And it's ineffective, and it doesn't resolve anything. And I think it's not unusual to have a conversation like this in a public body, because we're the place where things take place and where these conversations happen. But if this really is troublesome to you, go and engage with these people. Show up and talk with them. Let them know that you are human, or let them know what your beliefs are, and let them know what you see is wrong, or how it doesn't fit in your view of what humanity is, or what God means, or whatever your values are. But to just try and push them out of the way is just, it's fruitless. It might be satisfying for a little while, but it's fruitless.
So I'm going to suggest as an action item that Ann Beekman, as the convener of the Diversity Committee on the first agenda, take up Robin Morgan's excellent suggestion and make a recommendation to the full board about ways that our greater school community could indicate our support of all members of our community. Thank you, Robin, for that suggestion. Thank you, convener. So, in a less controversial item, the Policy and Amendment Committee has also been working on the amendments to the Articles of Agreement.
Less controversial.
It's
Is your
less-
sarcasm meter laughter from the audience?
So let me start with the very less controversial. David, did you send around the Leadership Council language that you had?
I sent the board, and I didn't send it to the attorney because I thought that you were allowed to.
Okay, so I'll send
Yeah, that came in an email yesterday.
That I remember.
So the Amendment Committee is moving forward with, the Policy and Amendment Committee is moving forward with adding leadership councils with the language that David Scholes brought, which, has gone to the full board, and sending that to the attorney, because we believe leadership councils are extremely important for the future of community involvement in our schools. So even though we're still working on a policy for that, the policy and the amendment will basically be the same, so that we assure that those leadership councils are only removed at the will of the voters. Yes.
I read what David said around, and I wasn't sure that it had the local input will be advisory. I didn't see that in the...
It might have preceded that conversation, Sean. It may not be there.
Okay.
So I will also send that to Barb, because I made the mistake. It hadn't gotten up to Barb because it was on paper, it wasn't digital. So I will post that, or I'll send Barb an email and make sure that the current version gets posted on the website. We also worked on staying in the less controversial. We also are waiting for the attorney on the school closure and grade operation language of those amendments to come back. And then, which we have discussed, the board, any changes that are made are going to be will be brought back from our legal counsel, but he's pretty much approved them, so they're just in their final go-round. The representation amendment, we had Lyle and I, the whole committee was invited, but what with it being summer, it ended up being just Lyle and I spoke with the attorney about representation, and his concern is that 3333 would not be legal based on the results of Barnes Mount Anthony. The recommendation in that case, which was more lopsided in terms of the size of Bennington to the 5 smaller districts, so it was Bennington was larger than the smaller districts than Brattleboro is now. The recommendation in that case was 4222. So 5222 would be more than what the courts had ordered in a similar situation. Is that clear to the board? Like mathematically, it came down to a math problem. Whereas Brattleboro statistically getting the same or more representation than Bennington was in that court decision. He recommended in this case that we move to direct representation election, such that Dummerston would vote for the 2 Dummerston reps, Brattleboro would vote for the 4, Guilford would vote for their 2, and Putney would vote for their 2 representatives. That was his recommendation based on the law. And I sent that opinion around to the full board and had him review it to make sure that I had conveyed the information correctly. So the committee met yesterday. Is that right? The committee met yesterday working on the 4222 and discussed direct representation versus at-large representation and the pros and cons of that, which we can discuss. But want to bring it to the full board to discuss at-large representation, which is everybody in every community votes for every board member, versus direct representation, where each town votes for their representative. It was further complicated by discussing the voting schedule with Barb and how this would all happen, but I don't think I want to complicate our philosophical issues with the nitty-gritty of boards of civil authority, and I'm not sure I could even recollect it correctly, but it may mean that if we go one way versus another, it may push out the vote, and the votes may have to be done separately. But I think we want to do what we feel is philosophically correct. And if we have to wait 2 more weeks or have 2 votes, that is, or there's some, we've thought of some creative ways around it, but anyway. But I don't want to muck up the waters. So I'm going to ask for board, is it a point of order or a clarification?
Well, I wanted a clarification on something you said. And when you talk about an open election, which means that every town votes for every board member, is it an open election where the top vote getters get seats, or are we precluded to what this year was, where I got to vote for people in every town even though I didn't want to, and that's not an open election. You can say it is, but that to me is not a definition of an open election. An open election is the top vote getters get the number of seats. And so if you're going to have, I'm going to argue for towns, whatever number you come up with, I can support that, whatever those numbers are, but I need clarification of that.
Clarification stage. I'm clarifying, and you moved it really good job, Dick DeGray. I'm opening it to comment later. I'll clarify. An at-large election would be what you voted on before. I'm sorry to hear that you didn't vote for me. We've known each other for a long time. That is an at-large voting situation, which I heard you weigh in on. Then the direct representation is what your traditional, well, from you as a Brattleboro resident, vote for the folks from Brattleboro that you want to represent you. So that is the nut that we're trying to get through, is what, and right now it's all at large. That's what you experienced in the last election. So is there any more clarification from the board? Yes, Sean.
Well, I touched bases with Donna Russa-Savage at the AOE, and what she said was that the default articles is a hybrid model. That's how we were elected. It was a hybrid model where everybody in every town voted for every individual that was going to be on the board. And she says that that hybrid model would have to be retained, which would also have the same voting structure, unless we change the whole model to a proportional model, which would then skew it even more in terms of larger population towns and smaller population towns. So I received this from her yesterday.
Yes, David.
I think we've gotten different information from our attorney, and I think that more important than who we're getting the information from is what we put on the agenda. which is we're going to, I think, try to decide tonight whether we will put on the ballot an amendment that will, where the representatives of each town will be voted by the citizens of that town, or whether the representatives will be voted by all in the commingled system that Dick just described. And if we could just kind of really stick with those two and just, which way do we want to do it? I even say, let's have a show of hands to see how long we have to talk about this. We may already have a real clear majority on one side or the other, and we can just move on. It's going to go to the voters. What we have to do is decide what are we going to recommend to the voters. And it's not this massive thing that we need to spend the whole night talking about. We really just need to decide which one we want to present. The voters are going to decide, not us. We're just going to say what we're sending to them.
So please address your laughter to me.
And your insults.
This would be great if it weren't a big thing. Let me just make sure board members, as they're deliberating about this, and we'll do our, people can weigh in, and I'll take a show of hands, please. If you plan on speaking, raise your hand when I get to that point so that I can apportion the time, because we're not going to accomplish anything after 9 o'clock. People can't function after 9 o'clock. So is there any more?
Ask a question?
Yeah, a clarifying question, sure.
I didn't see any item for the board to vote on this on the agenda. It just says committee report.
The policy committee, what the policy committee writes about. So we're just, because the policy committee has not brought the policy forward.
Okay.
So the policy committee got stuck on this issue and brought it back to the full board because it's such an important issue. My agenda has to go out 10 days in advance because of warning policies. So we didn't know we were stuck on it till yesterday. So I apologize, it's not my intent. It's just all the statutes that are out there make it hard to be transparent and accountable at all the time, as you, I'm sure, have run across.
I have a clarifying question too.
Yes.
You're only discussing whether it's at large or direct. You're not discussing the potential for Brattleboro to have more positions. Am I misunderstanding that?
The committee, based on the legal opinion, is going with 4 to 2.
So that's a done deal. That's going.
I mean, the board could choose not to vote for that article in the end, based on whatever mind changing they have, but that's what the committee, based on kind of board feedback, has moved forward with. And making sure that we are in the bounds of the U.S. Constitution.
I'll follow up on that when it's time.
So any more clarifying questions?
I have a clarifying question. Can you clarify, so why is the 2222 okay and the 3333 is not? Was there was that weighed or?
So the attorney that we have hired that used to be legal counsel for the Agency of Education differs with the opinion of Donna Russo-Savage, who is not legal counsel for the AOE, but a legislative attorney who now works for the AOE, implementing Act 46. So his opinion is based on Barnes versus Mount Anthony, that direct representation is probably not legal or is concerning.
And so, in his opinion, 2222 might be problematic?
Yes. Yes.
May I speak on the matter of the at-large?
Any more clarifying questions? We're good? Absolutely.
In March,
Sorry, can you just state your name?
Kurt Dimes, Brattleboro. In March, Brattleboro approved a charter amendment for lowering the voting age to 16 and for allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to serve on the school board. The Brattleboro delegation has promised its support, and the chairman of the governance committee in the legislature will advocate for it. I think this compels separate direct representation because the other towns in the area, Putney, Dummerston, and Guilford, do not have an amendment to allow 16 and 17-year-olds on the board.
And we can't.
We can't.
Hold on.
Well, maybe it's not a point.
I can answer this.
So that's what I said.
So did you want to?
I just want to report that Putney actually did look into this. I wore a youth vote pin at the WHS board meetings. Putney doesn't have a charter. Consequently, we actually cannot make that law. Only the state of Vermont can make it for us.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we can't make this decision based on what the legislature might do. Anticipating legislative action is really a black hole. So I think that's really out of order at this point.
Thank you. So how many people want to speak to this motion? Sorry.
I just wonder whether the board should deliberate a little bit more so we know what we're actually going, because that was, you know, as a policy committee, we all met and we said that we have to take it to the full board, so we have to know if the 4222 is something, and then the next sticking point is whether it's everybody votes for everybody or each individual town votes for everybody. So that's sort of what I think needs to be decided.
Right, but I'd like to get public input before the board makes that decision. Because as I said at the beginning, I will allow the public weighing in on an issue before the board deliberates. And the board there was nobody on the board that was, most of us are on the policy, a good portion of us are on the policy committee too, so there's that. So the board did not seem to have questions, so I moved it to the public input. So, as I was, how many of you are interested in having input on this item? 7. So I'm going to go with 14 minutes, huh? If you can do it in under 2 minutes, everybody in the room would appreciate it. So try and choose your words carefully. We all listen better with your words.
I'll put my finger up 2 minutes ago.
Thank you, Sean. Liz is going to fall out of her seat, so Liz Adams.
Well, no, that's what my legs don't know. But Liz Adams from Putney, I really recommend that it be at large. We didn't want to merge in the first place. The merger was voted down. One of the reasons was because of the representation around the state. Boards that are formed by each town voting for its members. The larger towns are now taking action against the smaller towns. And it's insidious, it's creeping. I know of at least 3 schools that are going to be closed because the larger town had the votes. If we vote at large, people can pay attention to who's running. The way this one went was like rather fast and towards the end of the year, but people need to pay attention. I paid attention to who was running from Brattleboro, and the other towns didn't have any contested elections. But people just need to pay attention. You're setting up the potential for World War III among our towns if it's town having only voting for its members. We're supposed to be thinking of all the children and all the schools, not Brattleboro schools, Dummerston schools, etc.
Jody Norbido from Dummerston. Attended 3 years of study committee meetings, and the mantra was always, it's all the children, it's all the children, it's all the children. We've gotten so far away from that now, we've gotten right back to it's Brattleboro versus Dummerston versus Guilford, whatever. I want to say that as Dummerston voted 5-1 against this merger, and there are a whole lot of people in Dummerston who are not happy because we have to be merged. And the reason they're not happy, and they're watching what's going on now, is the representation issue. This is what Dummerston feared would happen, that Brattleboro would be running the show. And this is not what Dummerston representatives want. And it looks like their fears, what you're talking about, their fears are going to be realized. Just Monday, I ran into a young father. I hadn't met before. He was not part of the group that was against the merger. And he said to me, what is going to happen to our school? What is going to happen to Dummerston? I had to tell him I have no clue what's going to happen because it's out of our hands. And if you continue down this road, it's really going to be out of the small schools' hands. And I agree with Liz. I know what's going on throughout the state. I don't think a lot of the people sitting there know what's going on throughout the state, but it is happening. Schools are closing, they're moving students around, they're moving teachers around, they're doing all of this. Just locally, up here in Newfane, before they even merged, they moved the 6th grade into the BAMS, and then they took them away from Jamaica, and now Jamaica's going to be a pre-K, and people are going to have to go miles. It's hurting. It's going to hurt your lower economics. And I really think that's not the intention. I like all the members on this board. I don't have any fears with all of you. But come March, I have no idea what's going to happen. Thank you.
Hi, Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just want to say that I think that this discussion would benefit from a real ramping down of emotion and a more like Dr. Spock approach, or Mr. Spock, I guess. Dr. Spock, I'm sure, could all help us as well. But I think that a lot of people went to like my worst fear in this moment. But if you look at the idea that like Brattleboro's running the show, I probably have heard a total of about 10 words from Brattleboro board members at this meeting. I don't feel like that is the case at all. And like Liz said, there really wasn't even any opportunity for Brattleboro members to choose representatives on this board other than their own 2, even though we have all the voters. I also want to address the idea that adding more members from Brattleboro means closing schools. Okay, that is a baseless boogeyman of an idea. And I think that Brattleboro has quite a different culture and different values than some of the other towns that have been mentioned and made comparisons to. If you look at what kind of discussions have gone on for the past 3 years on the Brattleboro board and at our town meetings, and I only mentioned 3 years because that's how long I've been paying attention to it, but you know, there's probably more to mine from in the years previous to that. I have never once heard any discussions that were about let's cut programs from kids. One of our schools that we have had a presentation from every year on the board is a small school, and their whole theme of their presentation is the beauty of a small school. We have been hearing about what is great about small schools and celebrating our small school here in our district for years, and we were doing it on a much smaller budget than this board has. So the idea that now, given a much larger amount of resources, that Brattleboro is suddenly going to decide we want to close all schools is just not true, and I feel like it's hurting this conversation for people to keep bringing that up.
I'll let you have it. Ruby McAdoo from Putney. So I am choosing to enter into all of this thinking not from a fear-based mentality. And from my perspective, personal perspective, I don't feel like there's any problem with, I don't personally see a problem with increasing the Brattleboro representation. I understand the concerns, but I'm choosing not to be afraid about that. The thing that I would like to address is I respectfully disagree with Dick DeGray, although I don't know you, you're very nice. I just don't agree about my experience of voting and the ballot and voting for all of you is that you gave us a considerable amount of information from which I could research to know each of you. And so I felt informed, and now I feel very happy to actually feel like each one of you, regardless of your town, represents me, my kid, in my community. And I think it would be a real tragedy to move away from that, so that I'm only voting for 2, it sounds like, what you're considering, people for Putney. And then when I come to this meeting, those are the only people who think of me as their constituents, that's concerning to me. And I think the argument of that, why should I vote for these other people, I only care about the people from my town, is really a disservice to the process that's just gone through and to the vision that I think was in place around this merged district.
You know,
Please state your name. State your name.
And town. Brattleboro. Fear-mongering. I served on the BUHS board when there were 17 people. 9 were from Brattleboro, and then Guilford had 2, Dummerston had 2, Putney had 2, and Vernon had 1. In all the years that I have followed the BUHS board, never once did Brattleboro block vote to push an agenda item through. Everybody that sits on the board, that runs for the board, you hope that they're for education and education only, and not for consolidation or whatever you're doing. These people, and well, certainly when I served, we have a fiduciary responsibility. And you're going to have tough decisions, and it's going to be interesting watching these finance committee meetings and the board come together and letting go of this personal attachment to whatever town you're from in your school. So whether there's 4 Brattleboro members or 2 Brattleboro members, I want to vote for the people that are going to represent me. Not for any other reason, but they're representing me. And I never got to vote for the people in Dummerston, Putney, or Guilford when I served on that high school board. And maybe you should have gone to meetings to see how that board functioned. And they functioned very well. In fact, the board was so big when I was there, they reduced the size of the board from 17 to 9. And I believe that Brattleboro's representatives went to 5. Am I correct with that number? 5, and then everybody else had 1. And I still believe that there was never a block vote by the Brattleboro voters to say, we're going to push this through, the hell with the other towns. They're there in unison for education to support the school. So thank you very much.
So just a question. So if we did choose to move to 4222, is it only that we can vote by town, or we have both choices?
We have both choices.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
The attorney recommended direct representation for a variety of reasons, commingled voting, and that was his recommendation.
But we can choose.
But we can choose it. Thank you. Jamie.
Jamie Comtois, Putney, Vermont. As I walked out on June 25th, I was really curious because I love data, and I'm a little bit of a data geek. And so I asked what the vote totals were. And so we had 220 voters on June 25th. We had, the numbers I think are 1 or 2 off, so when you go check me, know that they're going to be 1 or 2 off. Guilford had 33, which is 1.9% of their voting population. Putney had 26, 1.4% of their population. Brattleboro had 133, which was 1.4% of their voting population. And Dummerston had 28, which is 1.7% of their voting population. And it struck me what it felt like to drive instead of getting to vote on our budget in town. It was interesting to drive that night as a mom who had to schedule how I was going to nurse the baby to sleep, and I had to pump milk that day so I could be out for 2 hours, and then the meeting went long. And I even watched with the childcare situation just the challenges that arise for people to participate. And so I sat watching, and I agree that the fear-mongering, I have fear, I will name it, I have fear. And articulating it usually comes from watching data. And when Liz Adams articulates some of the data that we've seen statewide, we've been told that that's not how humans behave here. And I really love that about our region. It's why I moved here, because we have really amazing humans, right? So I just think that this is the challenge we're faced with, is how we look at the data and what it means that all of the combined voting of all the towns was 87 voters, right? Out of 133 voters, and that people will turn out, especially when it's in their town, especially when it's the population hub. I'm looking forward to many of the values that I've seen expressed in Brattleboro coming, and Brattleboro supporting us to make some of our initiatives. But I just want to name that one of the challenges that's coming is that we are going to have to make economic decisions, and we have to look out for all of us. And I have watched and asked, I'm going to say 30 more seconds. I have watched and asked about how this has gone for folks, because I served on the body before this, and it was a huge amount of work. And I'm just so curious how you lovely 8 people are going to be able to know all the schools and solve all the problems of all these schools and be equal with all these folks. So I just want to say I just hope we are data. Look at the data.
And then one of the reasons is we'd like to have 10 or 12 people on this board to populate our committees and manage our departments. That's the other goal. I believe you've already spoken to it, Jody.
I didn't take my 2 minutes though.
And I'll give her mine. I had 2 minutes, so
You're
Jody can have my
seeing your 2 minutes. There is somebody who would like to speak that has not
Don't you
spoken.
want to speak?
There's somebody who has not spoken yet to the motion, so I'm recognizing her.
Georgia Morgan, Brattleboro. Yes, it just really shocks and saddens me to think that people are spreading rumors in towns around here that Brattleboro wants to close your schools. Nothing could be farther than the truth. Whatever happens up in the hills has nothing to do with Brattleboro. Just because some other towns are fighting about this doesn't mean that that happens here. If you're afraid that we might want to raise taxes to support programs, maybe that's a fear, but it isn't going to be closing your schools. The board is already even working on amendments that would stop anybody from closing schools without the consent of the population. So I just hope that I don't have to hear about this anymore.
I will recognize the final 1 minute from Jody Normandow.
All I want to say, I want to answer Dick DeGray, and I've heard this too many times, that the high school, it's a totally different animal than what we've got now. It's one board that takes care of one area and with all the kids in it. It's not separating the Dummerston kids from the Guilford kids from the Brattleboro kids. This one, we now have the Guilford school, the Dummerston kids school, and the Brattleboro kids. It's a whole different kettle of fish. And I just want to make that clear because that has been used as an example. I have been to high school boards. I've watched the high school boards. They do work well together, but it's one unit. We're not one unit. Thank you.
Well,
I've already addressed
I've been involved in this for a long time and have watched a lot of what's happened and I'm aware of what's going on around the state. And I really have been all over the place on both of these questions because I see values and I see concerns in every area. But I think that to kind of pull back and try to be objective, the Mr. Spock view here of where we really are at, we have those amendments that you just mentioned they're done. They're going to get voted on. We just have to get done with this part so we can figure out when. And they protect all the towns from having their schools closed. They protect the moving of kids. All of the things that we're seeing around the state are in those amendments. And if the populace, if the school district membership, the public in our towns, votes to approve them, then if the whole Wyndham Central School Board moved to our towns and ran for boards and got on these boards, or the whole Harwood Union, where the places where these things are happening that people are afraid of and justifiably afraid of, it's really awful. But even if they all came here, they'd still have to get everybody in all of these towns to agree to it, and the town that was going to be adversely affected, the town that's worried about losing their middle school kids, or the town that's worried about having their schools closed, that town would also have to go along with it. So it's just, it's that level of the fear, it's blinding. It's a blinding fear because it's just not, it's really not going to happen. And we were really careful and crafted all these things. Other districts, other boards didn't, other merged boards didn't work as hard at this as we did. And my 2 minutes are up, but I just want to say one more thing. If we can get through this process and get these things on the ballot and get away from the governance issues that we've been working on for all these months and get into education issues, we will very quickly become one board and with one view, and that's all the kids. And if we do it right and we get leadership, vibrant leadership councils established, most of the initiatives that come to this board are going to come from the people that are in those schools, the parents, the students, the teachers, and the administrators that are in those schools. And if we do it right, there's just, it really is blind fear. We have put structures in place. If the public approves them, it's going to be really hard to close a school, or really hard to move a group of kids if a town doesn't want it to happen. It's impossible at this point.
Thank you, Dave. I just clarified with Sean that we will not time board members because you know that you'll hear from me if you go beyond 3 minutes. So with that, I recognize. Tim, were you looking to be recognized?
I mean, I certainly hope that we can move beyond all of this and move back towards unity, which I think we find on most issues on this board. It's sort of one of our sticking points is this one. But I do want to say that I'm not sure that I believe that that the protections that we would have based on the articles of amendment that we drafted are actually as bulletproof as being presented. That, in fact, if push came to shove, the legislature or perhaps other forces beyond us could go back and say, that's great that you voted for that, but the school's not viable, and
that's true.
We're going to change the rules.
We can't stop that. Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Gold. Are you all through?
Yeah. We can't do anything. We can't stop that. And what we decide here tonight, or what we decide on the ballot about these amendments, can't affect that. Only lobbying our legislators can affect that.
I think I would say that Tim's point is that we can't say that it's going to be very
right. Absolutely.
There are forces that we are not in control. Though we are all powerful and all knowing, we don't control everything in the state of Vermont, sadly. So.
Can I ask a clarification?
Yes, of course.
Laura Chapman from Putney. If the voters choose to vote these amendments down, which I'm concerned with the changing representation they would, because they've shown in the past that this is something they really don't want. So if they were to choose to vote it down, what's next? What does that look like?
Which amendment?
The amendments that you're putting forth
to them.
The whole
slate?
Is each one individual?
Each one by law has to be individually voted.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
You can't do a slate.
Okay. So, thank you.
So what would happen? I don't know. So, I am not going to speculate because I'm sure that with the full board support and our common united belief that this is good for our schools and the give and take that we have had as a board to give the small towns protections, that they would pass. That's what I will say. Is it a clarifying question?
It's clarifying.
Yes.
Jamie Comtois, Putney. On the transition board, I remember the articles of agreement that we drafted had what you referred to as each town must vote. And when the commingling happened, I remember us going, wait a minute, how can we make a promise to a group of voters that once we've commingled that we're actually going to be able to follow through on how we wrote the article, because you can no longer distinguish what the town voted for. So has that been clarified?
If there were a vote to close, is that what you mean, a vote to close a school, or
The very specific articles on the changing of the grade composition and the closure of schools said that each town would get to vote.
That vote could not be commingled for that.
But we're being told that we have to commingle votes. So how do you follow through on that promise?
No, we're being told we have to commingle votes if we do at-large representation. So in that case, we would have to have two different ballots. This is the BARB conversation that is long and involved and could put this whole group to sleep, that you would have to have a vote that would be, for these amendments to pass, if you're going to close a school, you'd have to have a vote that is counted by the town clerks. And then if you have a commingled vote, boards of civil authority from each town go forward, but you can do, those kind of votes would have to be disaggregated. They cannot
But
be
do you
commingled.
have legal counsel to tell you that that's true, and have you talked to the Secretary of State about the commitment that we're making to folks prior?
So there are two different things that we're talking about. The votes to close schools, each town would have to vote that separate. It would not be commingled. The only thing that we've talked about commingling would be I believe it's the election for, and that is still to be determined here, how that's going to be voted. Whether Putney's going to vote for Putney, Dummerston for Dummerston, or if that's going to continue like it did last time, all at large.
So we'll get a vote total on the Articles of Agreement vote when it comes up by town?
So that depends on what the articles, the default articles say, and I don't have my fabulous highlighted copy, because some of those votes are done by town. I think those votes, anybody? I believe those votes would not be commingled, because I believe any change to those articles has to be, yes, has to be approved of by each town. So changing representation, changing the school closure and grade operation, each town has to vote. Therefore, that vote cannot be commingled. That vote has to be taken in each town. I will even follow up on that next time I'm on the phone with an attorney otherwise, but I'm at 99 and 44/100% sure of that, based on my conversation with Barb Nowakowski at the main office. So, who's as good as the Secretary of State in my book? I understand. So, back to the board. How shall we do this in terms of making a recommendation? You're right, there is no motion on the table. How shall we go forward discussing at-large abstaining? Could I have a show of hands? Would that work for people? So going with at-large, I'll make a motion. I don't want to make the motion because I'm...
Yeah, I would just say that a recommendation, can I do that?
Make a recommendation.
Okay, I would recommend that, this is not a motion, I would recommend that the WSESD board be increased by 2 members from the town of Brattleboro, and that all members of all towns would vote for those 2
at large.
At large.
Seconded?
So it wasn't really a motion, it was just an opinion.
So I'll make the recommendation, so you can speak to Christina's recommendation or Sean's I recommend, just as a way to get this done, I recommend that we vote representationally. And we increase 4-2-2-2.
Since it's a recommendation, can I call a question? We talked about it for an hour.
I'm asking for people to weigh in, so that is calling, I called the question, I said, tell me what, do you agree, there's 2 recommendations, so.
Okay.
Go with either Sean or Christina, and we'll take a tally and bring it back to the committee.
I would go with Sean.
I would go with Christina.
I'm not decided yet.
Kelly, what, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm not sure. Christina. Sean?
So, we have a dead tie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Can you, I didn't see, you said Sean, and then Ann and Emily, what were your votes? I didn't hear you.
It was on my recommendation.
Yeah, so yours,
Yep.
okay.
I recommend
And
everybody
your-
vote for everybody.
Christina, and she went with Sean.
At large 4-2.
Okay.
So, we can table it if people are not comfortable and want to come to committee, discuss it in committee some more, if people are not ready to take a vote. It's not going to really affect our timeline because of Indigenous Peoples' Day, so we could table it till the next meeting and people can read up on at-large voting, if that's okay with the board.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Sure.
So when we're talking about at-large voting, we're
Can you
saying
speak
that.
up, please?
Yeah, sorry. When we're talking about at-large voting, we're not talking about how the amendments would be voted on.
No.
We're just talking about how the representation
Yes.
representatives would be elected. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just clarifying for everybody because we went that direction too.
Yeah.
So.
If I may, just, this would be stepping ahead a little bit beyond where we are right now. And that is, if that amendment does pass, if it's 4-2-2-2, the people that want to run from the town of Brattleboro could actually take out a petition.
Maybe.
And they would be elected the day that the amendment passes.
So, point of clarification, that may be more difficult, depending on what we decide after talking to Barb for about 45 minutes after our meeting. So that's new information that I got. So it's not certain that could actually be done just because of the nitty-gritty of elections. And so she was kind of thinking, so that's what I was saying at the beginning, that may or may not be doable.
Oh.
So
Sorry.
that would, and I said that was our preference, that we would go to an election versus an appointment, but we may, and then so we can have to weigh the consequences of the second election or some other, but we have not discussed that as a board. I have not brought that information to the board, so I don't want to make, because it may not be doable. So that's, sorry.
Can I ask one more clarifying?
Sure, I think, Robin, did you have a clarifying question?
It's a comment, actually, but I think, I'm looking at the Articles of Agreement, the default Articles of Agreement, and I think that was incorrect when you said that it had to be approved by each town, because
Which one?
the board representation.
Okay, that might be unusual.
Yeah, so the other articles, they don't have something governing leadership council, since they probably didn't even think of that idea. But when you want to make changes to the school closure or grade configuration, that has to be approved by each town, those amendments. But the one about board representation just says by a majority of the voters. So that one would be a commingled vote. But the votes to if at a later date, the board in the future would choose to close a school or move grades, the amendments that you have written say that those would be an each town vote. So it's only a vote on the amendment of representation and the election of board members that would be commingled.
Thank you for the clarification. I was trying to remember. I remember the other two perfectly.
I was asking for more detail about that, so I got it. Thank you, Robin.
So do we want to table this motion so that people can really consider? It's a very complex issue, understanding at-large voting. I have studied it for 4 years, and it's hard to parse out exactly what it means and what commingled ballots mean. And I luckily had a 4-year crash course in that, but I completely understand and want to make sure people are making decisions they're comfortable with, because it's pretty important.
Madam Chair, could I ask just a question?
Quick one.
Are you still planning on having the votes in September?
That's probably not going to happen, Jody.
I didn't think it would, but I would like to know.
So I guess we're tabling the motion to unfinished business for next time, and perhaps we will have a committee meeting, and I will invite members of the board who are still undecided, so we can spend a little more time talking about commingled votes, at-large voting, and exactly what that would mean. Okay, did the Policy and Amendment Committee talk about anything else? I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. Are there any other questions on the report submitted by David from the Policy and Amendment Committee? Hearing no questions, I am moving on. I believe Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee has not convened as yet. So if you are, let me see, Tim Morris, come on down. You are the convener. So, and then the Sustainability Council, which we did not, because we had no Brattleboro representation last time, so we did not, I couldn't ask for committee commitments. We hadn't finalized other committee commitments. So we need to start putting that together and put it out to the community. We are going with a council which will have much like a leadership council, it will have at least one board representative and at least one board representative and community members, and that's a wonderful place for students to participate. I would suspect if the board, because there aren't legal. It's tricky on a board when you have confidentiality issues and things like that. But on a sustainability council would be a great place to have student representation, as we are doing on leadership councils. So it almost is an interesting distinction of a council that we welcome student representation and participation. So I'm looking for a convener and a volunteer for the Sustainability Council. And I know we are overwhelmed with committee meetings, and these meetings that we show up for here are the tip of the iceberg on the work that this board is doing, and I just want to give a shout out to the 7 people sitting up here with me. Just reading through the minutes and the warrants is about a half-time job, so I appreciate it. So with that, knowing that I'm asking for just one more pound of flesh, are you volunteering?
No, just.
Oh, okay. I'm going to just ask the board, finish if I can find a volunteer from the board to serve on this council.
Sustainability?
Sustainability. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate it. Yes.
Kurt Dimes, Brattleboro. Is the Sustainability Committee what's been previously referred to as the Climate Crisis Committee?
Yeah.
And is this an official name change that's been suggested?
I think that's just what we shorthanded it to, was Sustainability Council.
So it's
I think
been
the motion was to discuss climate change and that, and so we...
Climate crisis, yeah.
Climate crisis, and so I don't think there was a motion to call it a climate crisis committee.
Climate action.
Climate action committee. So sustainability, I think, would address that quite well as an attempt to, boards continually talk about sustainability, so moving it into and climate, and things that we can do as boards to mitigate our footprint on this earth. So it's not anything unusual. Putting in a committee format like we are doing now is a change that's necessitated by the new number of, the large number of commitments our board has to undergo. It's a council. If I said committee, it's just that it's getting to 8 o'clock and I'm...
Okay, well, I would like to keep it as climate crisis, and I would advise the board that it is conforming with the vote if it also keeps on its own agenda that same subject. Because that was the original advisory vote on the 25th of June. The intent there, I speak with some measure of authority because I made the motion, was that it should be on your agenda, that the climate crisis was of such a degree that the people in the highest levels of authority should not come to a meeting without considering it.
Well, as I spoke at the last meeting, the council would present at each meeting. There will be a board representation, making sure that that's facilitated, and it's just an opportunity to bring other people in. So it would be on every meeting. I will take your advice under. When that committee convenes, they can name themselves. It's fine with me, and they are responsible for taking that motion.
Thank you, Madam
If they
Chair.
so choose to incorporate that into their one-line simple synopsis of their mission statement, just for the general public as well as their full-blown mission statement. But we have many committees to convene and get moving, so this is now our next level.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Thomas, for stepping up.
Christina, I have a question. I think I missed it, but the policy talking, or the discussion on policy, I had a clarifying question. Was that what you already resolved? I think I missed it. I was concerned about the policy that allowed teachers to bring their children to Putney Central School.
We have not revisited that policy.
Okay, so I just was wondering where that is in the process.
That's a great question. I have wondered that myself. And I don't know how we're handling that because as far as I know from the articles, nothing has come before the board in terms of that request from teachers. The only thing that's come before the board are what is allowed by the articles, which is student circumstance, which has always existed. There's always been student circumstances where somebody attends a school with non-residents. So nothing has come before the board, and we have not discussed changing that policy.
You haven't discussed changing the default policy that says only with a request, you mean? Which
Well,
means,
that's defined by the articles of agreement that the state has given to us.
so the concern I have is that when I met with the principal of Putney Central School, he was quite concerned that he has, that I recall off the top of my head, 3 teachers that the agreements that he had made with them that brought them to our school were actually contingent upon the fact that we had made agreements with them and commitments that their students were actually going to be able to attend Putney Central, and that his thought was that because of the age of those students, it might not impact this year, but it will impact maybe next year. And so when I articulated that this was discussed, he articulated a lot of concern about the impact that would have on our teachers at Putney Central. So that I don't know how that conversation has gotten dropped.
Well, if nothing was, sorry, the conversation hasn't been dropped. What's happened is that if there are any parents that are wanting their children to attend the school where they work, the principal has informed that teacher to write me a letter, and then I've been interviewing the parent and determining whether or not there's a space in the school, if there are extenuating circumstances, what is needed. While those policies are in place in certain places, I have been saying that policy is in place now. We can follow that policy for now. We cannot guarantee that down the road that policy isn't going to change. So any teacher who has this year asked to bring their child to the school they work, we've said yes with that caveat.
So meaning agreements we have with teachers that they might ask next year won't necessarily be fulfilled?
It'll be dependent upon what happens with policy as we move forward.
It is on our list of policies to review, but we had something unexpected come up that took a lot of policy, as you may have noticed, a lot of policy amendment committee time. And so it's kind of on that second layer to look at that and try to harmonize the policies and make sure that we're in agreement with the articles of agreement that have been handed down from the omnipotent and omniscient State Board of Education.
Because of the late hour and because we've kept some members of the whole District 6 here for quite a while, can we jump ahead to
That's okay with the board? Can we jump ahead to new business B?
Because we can come back to
Yes, this all
LPB.
this stuff can get done. Yeah, it's just they require you to do unfinished business, but if it's okay with the board, we'll move ahead and move on to item 8B. I don't hear any objection. Turf field presentation.
Thanks, Steve Perrin, Brattleboro Union High School principal. I'm going to be joined very shortly by Mr. Sawyer, athletic director, Mr. Clark, our facilities director, and Mr. Williams, one of our students, one of our seniors this year. So it's been a long road, and I guess the first thing I want to do is provide a little historical perspective. The idea of a synthetic field at UHS is not a new idea. It's an idea that's been around for a long time. Matter of fact, dating to the $56 million plus renovation in early 2000 is when that conversation started. At that time, it was determined that we were not going to do it. So we did not do it. Along the way, we've continued to add both boys and girls sports, and we've continued to add those. We've added lacrosse, we've added ultimate frisbee, we've added soccer at several levels, and we also service BAMs as well as BUHS. So what we're talking about is we're not just talking about high school sports, we're talking about high school and BAMs. As part of the renovation project, they did move the tennis courts. They used to be located in front of BAMs. They got moved. And when they got moved, that took a serious chunk of real estate that we use for practice fields. So we've been working along for many years. My predecessor in 2007 wrote a letter to the school board indicating that field space was at a premium and that we were running out of field space and we needed to address the issue. Mr. Familari, Joe Familari, many years ago made a generous offer to us that we could use what's now the Baybeck fields. They're called Familari Field out of respect, I think, for him. We actually began to use those fields. We were allowed to use those in a lease, and that lease is renewed for each season. And we pay $1, and it's been a fantastic asset that we've been able to use. The downside is that property and those buildings have been on the market and off the market several times throughout the years. And we're kind of at the whim. If that property sells, then we could use that access. That would be a problem for us. In addition, this year we expanded the practice field. We also do use Dummer Field down the road. That's a field that actually, I believe, elementary schools owned back in the day, but we use it. And we created Sawyer Field as part of the renovation project. So we've been maximizing our field space. We've been trying very hard to find out ways to be creative with that field space and to use field space effectively. Along the way, we removed the track as one of our improvements, and that happened, I believe, in 2010. We put in a new track, a composite track, which has served us in the community well. It's used a lot by people all year long. People walk on it, they run on it, students, staff, public, a lot. When we removed the old grandstands, the intent of that was to create a field in there that would become a centerpiece for our athletic programs and for our PE programs. The field as it stands now is off-center. And so if you look at the field, which is primarily used for football and lacrosse now, if you look at the field, it has what's called a crown in the middle of it. Right now, that crown is off-center in the footprint of the whole field, because that field was constructed when the old grandstands were in place. So now we have this opportunity with those old grandstands gone and new grandstands put in, that we'll be able to use that field, put in a synthetic surface, use it for all of our sports. That would make it the penultimate step in our plan, because then we would have a composite, we would have a turf field, a composite track, grandstand. We renovated the Colonel's Den in 2010. We put in a press box. That would allow boys, girls, high school, middle school sports to use that field all the time. In addition, we looked at the idea. Do we go ahead and do we purchase Baybeck Field? Do we take a look at
Point of order.
Yes.
Per times, Brattleboro, could we clarify Mr. Perrin's capacity here? Is he speaking as a member of the public that should be limited to a 2-minute speech?
You've been invited here to make a presentation on the legacy district's history of the turf field and their recommendation as it was made to the BUHS board.
I see. So as he's an invited, then
he's
yes.
an invited guest.
I understand.
And the principal of BUHS.
So, we looked at it, and Mr. Rucker probably remembers when he and I met with a real estate agent. We actually went up there, we looked at the Baybeck property, and it was determined that it was probably not cost effective for us to buy that at that time. That status hasn't changed. It's a wonderful field. If we were to purchase that, that would be more fields that are off-site, which makes it harder for our trainer to provide service to students. Parking is difficult up there. There's a lot of reasons why that's probably not a viable alternative going down the road. So as our field use has increased in the fall, for much of the time, the field does stand empty because the field has a limited amount of time it can be used. As that field stands empty in the fall, it's used for walkthroughs by one sports team on Fridays or on Thursdays. It's used a limited time during a game. We do let Pop Warner use it still. They still use it on Saturdays. So we try to preserve that field as much as possible, but then in the spring, we do have lacrosse on that field. Right now, as it's structured, it's not suitable for any other sport. It's not suitable for soccer. It's not suitable for field hockey. Along the way, we've looked at other options. We've looked at the possibility of expanding Tenny Field. We looked at the idea that would we want to somehow change the orientation and structure of the baseball field so we could create more field space, create a larger soccer field in the outfield. We talked about moving the field outward, trying to like encroach in that direction to see if we could maybe make an outfield bigger. As we've looked at that, and we've done a lot of time, and Robert Clark's been great showing me overlays where he's showed me how fields may or may not fit. The space isn't large enough. So this year, when we approached the budget process, we looked at the budget, we looked at Mr. Rucker's guides, we looked at available funds, we looked at possible ways that we could install a turf field. We clearly have identified that need. We know that's a problem that we have right now. At the last meeting, at the annual meeting, we talked about the idea that structuring practices differently on this field would help, because instead of saying you just have one field to practice on, you could actually use that field for multiple practices within a day, and otherwise use time as a way to access more field space. The board approved that, and then in June, then they approved it. It was warned. I believe, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, there were 3 informational sessions?
Yeah, I think there were, yeah.
So there are informational sessions.
To the finance committee discussions.
Right. Finance committee discussed it. It went before the voters in June, and it wasn't approved. It was approved by the voters. In terms of benefits, the obvious benefits for our sports, a lot of our teams right now do play at other schools on synthetic surfaces. When we get ready for those games, we actually rent space on a synthetic field in the area, and we actually bus our teams there and they play. For our community, it would get used by our community, I'm sure. I have no doubt that we would have tournaments there. I have no doubt that people would want to use it, subject, of course, to the facilities use that we're going to work on. And
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And also, it's it's got what Chris Sawyer calls curb appeal. If you're a family and you're considering moving to Brattleboro, you're considering where you're going to go, you can look at our excellent programs. You can look at our STEM Academy, you can look at our Arts Academy, our International Studies Academy, you can look at our range of AP courses. Those are all there, and people can look at those. But even easier, you can drive up and you can walk around the school. You can see this gorgeous building now that the voters have supported, that Robert Clark does an incredible job of maintaining. It would be great if we could also walk out and they could see a state-of-the-art first-class facility where we do our athletics. That would be a really great thing for us. For a family considering where to go, it's a natural. There's been discussion about health issues. I'm going to let Chris kind of address a lot of those. There's been many studies done, several I think that came out this week that kind of address the idea of, is it safe, is it not safe? You're not going to find a scientist anywhere that's going to say anything is 100% safe, including walking outside. But what you will find is that they will say that the risk is not a significant risk. They will say that it's not a risk that is above a risk. We've had conversations about alternative fill. What people are most concerned about is they're concerned about the nature of the fill, which is something called crumb rubber. There are some biodegradable ones that we can look at. That's not where we're at in this process now, but we will consider those. There's also something called encapsulated crumb rubber. There's all kinds of alternatives out there that we're finding out more and more. Last week, I was at the Vermont Principal Academy. I had the opportunity to talk to the principal of Burlington High School. I had the opportunity to talk to the principal of Rutland High School. And I spent a lot of time with Bill Olson, and I kind of picked his brain. And I asked him, I said, when you guys put this in, why did you put it in? And he said, well, the reason we put it in is, number one, our new turf field failed, or the new regular field failed. But then he also said the other thing that they wanted is they wanted to make sure that they could have equity for all of their sports and everybody to play on that field, that they wanted to have a centerpiece field. I asked the question, I said, well, what about these concerns that people have about, health issues? And he said, he goes, we didn't have a lot of that when we put our field in. They put their field in 10 years ago. What he said, his answer, and I think it's a good answer, is that We're not going to play on it every single day. And when our athletes go and play at other places, when they play at South Burlington and Burlington and Rutland, and they go to Burn Burton, they're already playing on those fields. We're already practicing on those fields. You know, and I said this at the last meeting. If I really thought this was dangerous, I wouldn't have my own daughter going and playing on turf fields now. I let her do that. I endorse that. I'm going to let Chris talk a little bit more about the studies, and then after that, we can take some questions. Mr. Williams, you wanted to speak as well, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll jump right into the studies, and I have some handouts and things I can email the board about some of the studies that have been done. Just other things that went into our decision on synthetic turf. But I think Mr. Perrin did a nice job, and thanks for having us up here just talking about, you know, how long we've been talking about turf discussion. In 2007, we first really started to take up what do we need to do. And as Mr. Perrin alluded to, we believe we have taken an incremental and responsible approach to making our facilities the best they can be for our students. We have put a new track in. We did widen the field inside the track because, as Mr. Perrin said, we have not been able to play soccer or field hockey on that field. The field's not been wide enough. So by removing the bleachers, now we have a wide enough field. We added bigger bleachers, press box, lights, a lot of the things that all of our students could enjoy, but we need this final piece to happen. So we have this long need of fields, and our maintenance and grounds crew have done a great job, but we're finally at that point where it's just harder to maintain our fields. And Nowitch Field, we really don't use as much as we could. Studies show that fields can be used for about 120 hours a year or 10 to 12 football games a year, and we're currently using our field for over 15 football games, over 32 lacrosse games, over 200 hours of use, and that's true for all of our fields. So we can't really move events around. We're just at the point, as Mr. Perrin said, we're adding ultimate. So a lot of stuff's going on at the school. Some of the things that benefits that we didn't discuss is currently our field hockey team plays on Tenny Field, and the field is not large enough to host playoff games. So oftentimes our team will earn a playoff spot and they can host a playoff game, but we have to go to Springfield or Bellows Falls or to the other school to play it. And that's kind of a lousy thing to tell your field hockey team, you know, you've done all this work, but you can't have a playoff game. And they can't because the field overlaps the dirt infield baseball field on Tenny Field. Our soccer team, varsity soccer teams, play on that same field. You know, they share similar things. A lot of the northern schools and better schools in the state don't want to come to Brattleboro to play soccer because they don't want to drive 2.5 hours to stand on a dirt sideline if it's raining. And it's just a small field, and it really hinders how well our kids can play. When we're going to larger fields, we're really at a disadvantage. All the state championships in the state are played on synthetic turf fields: field hockey, soccer, football. So it would really, you know, for our field hockey team, it really is an equitable thing in soccer as well. We really never host home scrimmages. We never have home away games early in the spring. And why is that a problem? So in April, our grounds crew just does not like us to use Nowitch Field for lacrosse games. So we generally don't start home games until May. And if we were going away maybe one time a week, kids might miss maybe one fourth block class. And kids can manage that, maybe missing one class a week. But when we're on the road for 6 or 7 or 8 games in April, that means they might be missing the same fourth block class 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times over a 2 or 3 week period. So that's over 1/3 of their classes. It's really hard to catch up. So we know kids who play sports do well academically, but that is a burden that sometimes they have to face that we don't see at other schools. The maintenance costs, labor costs, water use would be reduced dramatically. Again, we're adding ultimate as a sport, we're adding more middle school sports, so we'd be able to accommodate a lot more activity. And we also see a benefit in physical education. I just saw at a meeting, Mount Greylock High School is putting in a turf field now, and their director of physical education estimated that they would gain 35 days of outdoor use if they had a synthetic field, because when I'm thinking about it, our phys ed classes don't go outside after the winter until well after April vacation, because the fields just really aren't ready yet. So if we had this field, that's about 35 more days, and we have about 300 phys ed students, so 35 more days would certainly have a better curriculum. Opportunities for them. Summertime, we close down all of our fields all of the time, so we allow the rec to use it for track, but we don't offer a lot of programs. We can't offer summer camps. We can't offer opportunities because in the summer, we have to let our fields, repair from lacrosse season in time for football season. So again, if we had a turf field, we'd be able to do a lot more in the summer and have kids there year round, and we think that would be, another great benefit. So those are some of the other benefits. And yeah, chrome rubber is a concern. I think mostly the concern started, these fields have been around since the late 1990s and 2000s, and I'm not going to stand here and say they're 100% safe, right? Because I'm not going to do that, and no study ever will, but we can say that there hasn't been a study to date that says the fields are unsafe. So in 2010 or 2014, I think the biggest controversy started when a soccer coach at University of Washington started counting the number of female soccer players who had cancer and became real concerned and thought there might be a correlation. And NBC News picked up on it and ESPN, and it just became a big story. And since that time, there have been a lot of studies. The state of Washington, sorry, I'm also dry, long meeting. But the state of Washington just did a study and actually surveyed every soccer player that got cancer to determine why that person got cancer. And they determined with their studies that they would have expected to see more cancer based on the number of residents in Washington state. So a lot of the things we hear about chrome rubber are a little bit anecdotal. The EPA just released a report they've been working on since 2016. Part 1, they've been working with the CDC and other agencies, and they can find no correlation right now. And while they acknowledge that there are chemicals in chrome rubber, they're not finding that those chemicals are producing problems in human beings, whether through air transmission or swallowing pellets or absorbing the pellets in body fluids. So while there's a lot of anecdotals, there's no studies that show chrome rubber is a link to cancer. But as Mr. Perrin said, there are other alternatives we could take a look at.
Cool. My name is Gus Williams. I'm a senior at Brattleboro Union High School. I am the soccer boys captain and the lacrosse captain. And so I really just came out here tonight to speak about the turf field. And I started working on this project back in January with Mr. Clark and Mr. Sawyer. And when I realized it was really in demand. As a rising senior, I also played both sports since I was a freshman at the varsity level. So I got to be with the varsity team, and seeing the fields and the conditions and playing through now 3 seasons of lacrosse and soccer, the fields can't really stand up to our use. By the end of the season, they're destroyed. Tenny Field, it's short, as Mr. Sawyer touched upon. It's just getting destroyed, the dirt from the infield. And also for lacrosse, we spend like 2 to 3 weeks indoors in the hot, humid gym. It's painful. Everyone's whining. And with this new field, we could actually plow it with some of the equipment that we have to get the snow off of it. I've played personally, my club lacrosse team, I've played tournaments in April in snow, in February outside. The field's just plugged. So that would be a huge opportunity to us. Also, having this on our football field, which is surrounded by the track, right at the core location of our campus, gives all of our student athletes the ability to play under the lights at the central location, which is just, from a student athlete, that's a great feeling to have the stands behind you, your peers, your teachers, parents watching on this, what could be a great facility, means a lot. So that's really all I have to touch upon. I have a twin brother as well who plays soccer with me, and I actually last April I went around for 3 days with just a quick letter of support, and I got 120 signatures in 3 days of just my lunchtime. People came up to me in the halls. I explained what I was doing. People heard about it, and a lot of students were in support of it. As far as the health concern, I've been reading a lot of articles about it, and I think it's just something we need to just keep discussing, and it's something that everyone should feel safe about. And I actually have a great article that I could share. Maybe I'll send it to some of the head board members to disperse, but thank you.
WSES representation. So, so if there's a question, I'd love to, you can direct them to, sorry.
Sure. No, he's the facilities manager.
He's facilities manager. Were you part of the presentation? Sorry.
He is.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Hi, I'm Robert Clark. I actually do live in Putney, so I am part of the district. One thing that they didn't touch upon, and I want to create this picture for you, because I see it in a different way than what they see it, is adjacency. So I watch the students. How do they migrate from one place to another? So we have Farmallari Field is way up here. There's no services. You're not allowed to park out there anymore, so the parents can't park their vehicle and watch the children play. There's really no bathroom. There is an outhouse. There's no place for anyone to change. The girls play up there, and I can tell you that I've seen this, that they run into the woods to change. It's like, really? That's what we're providing for them? So the view quite a while ago was the big picture. We'll bring all the kids back home. Right now they're walking down South Main as they're going down to South Main Field down there. Some elementary school used to own, but now we own it. They're traveling and going to the neighbor's yards to cut through to get up to Farmallari Field. And the vision started a long time ago, and then we built it one piece at a time to bring the kids back to the core. So now we have the locker rooms right there, we have bathrooms there, everything that the student needs is right there, and they're safe. They're not wandering around. Where did my kid go? I sent them down the road and they never made it to the field. Where did they go? That's the world we live in. But they never leave the campus. If you're having them on the football field, which now is a multi-sport field, they're not traveling around the neighborhoods, they're not cutting through the neighborhood yard, they're not dressing in the woods, they're not going to the bathroom in the woods. All these things I've seen. This, we put the grandstands at $350,000. We did the track, $450,000. The press box, $60,000. We did the Colonel stand over. And this is the last piece. And for me, it just seems like this is a natural progression. Because it's, after that, it's completed. Now we have everything we need to support our kids. They do miss a lot of time from classes. I have heard teachers complaining about how much time that the kids are always being trucked off site. They're being trucked off site because they can't play at home. And they really should be able to play at home. We did look at the tennis field option to try to make that work, but you'd have to take the grandstands down to expand the field. And there's another group of people that object to that. And so every way you go, there's going to be some objections to something, because everybody has their attachments to some things. They have the attachments to that grandstand. Some want to play on natural turf. The natural turf, even if we didn't go with the synthetic, the last time that field was done was 1965. And I wouldn't call it a crown, it's more like a hump at this point, and it kind of just undulates. The field is upside, the goalposts are ready to fall down. If you've ever seen them, they do this in the wind now. It's time. It really is time to move into the next realm of how we're going to take care of our kids, how we're going to provide a safe environment, and the caveat of all of this is to have families come in. I gated off behind the grandstand so the kids are not running in between the vehicle traffic. So now we have a place where you can come, spend some quality time with your kids, and the little ones that are running around, you know they're going to be safe because they're in a gated area. So the idea is to have the kids playing under the lights, and I can see this vision now. The kids playing, and the parents there, the little kids running around, the colonel's there, and everybody's having a good time. And I just think that that's what we want to promote as a community. So it's not just the kids that go in school, it's the community at large. And then there's other events we could host to bring the community to the high school. A place to gather where it's safe, promotes goodwill, and just sportsmanship. Maybe even be nice to each other. That's why it's
So if members of the board or members of the community have questions, if a few of you could stay behind to answer any questions. The questions would, of course, be directed to me, as was instructed at the beginning of the presentation. But in the event there are any, I'd love to be able to phone a friend on the technical side of things. Does the board have any questions or comments?
I think it was, didn't you approach Landmark College? Excuse me, having a conversation with you, but
You can ask, yes, you can ask the chair a question. I'm the one who can ask the question.
you had the email from you sent out today from Landmark College, and it was very clearly laid out the advantages that Landmark Colleges has seen because of turf field.
I think it was a very well, and it just went out to the board, so I don't, people probably haven't had time to parse it. So Ruby McAdoo went to Landmark, spoke to people at Landmark College. They have put in a synthetic field that is the coconut husk fill instead of the crumb rubber.
And cork.
And cork.
I found that recently.
I think it said that too, so.
Yeah, it did.
But I'm just trying to scan it very quickly. So it's not the crumb rubber, which is the source of concern for a lot of people. So from what I have heard, at any rate. So they have, there are pluses and minuses about that, I would say, that they have stated here. I thought it was a really very helpful presentation. I called Putney School at the request, at the sort of suggestion, somebody in Putney. They had invested about the same time that Landmark did in resurfacing their turf field. I spoke to the head of school there. He said that it was never a question for them to do a synthetic field, but he would actually have considered it if he were to do it again, because there was a $15,000 seed failure. But they're very happy with their field, but it was a considerable investment, about $250,000 to redo the field and bring it up to the level of play. And I also spoke to a school in Marblehead, Massachusetts that's in the process of putting in a turf field that uses Brockfill, which is a wood infill instead of the crumb rubber. They're just finishing putting that in, and they haven't started playing on it yet, but they've been measuring.
What is that? There's a bat. Just close the door and we're fine.
No.
You got your net? You got your net one?
Hey, all you need is a tennis racket.
Okay. Lyle, if you get rabies, like, start in 3 weeks. I get time to take the shot, you know. And then I also spoke to somebody at the Tower School in Marblehead that has just installed a Brockfill, which is a relatively new field that has wood, so it's sustainable. It's harvested in the United States. They treat the wood proprietarily. It has some advantages, and they couldn't comment on what it was like to play on it at this point, but they did say that temperatures were 20 degrees lower than the synthetic field, like a few miles away. And so that was really important to them because they could start their practices, because the other school has to limit their practices with the crumb rubber infill. It is a problem, the high temperatures of play, but it can get up to 200 degrees. So you can't really play on that, but not maybe around here, but it's like 100 in this kind of latitude, like up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, it isn't that long in Vermont that it's hot, you know, when you have, but that was a big advantage. So I'm relating, I'm trying not to weigh in, I'm relating the conversations that I've had on various surfaces, so.
May I add, I just got a communication right before coming here from Landmark. That was a follow-up, and they said that the coconut cork fill was a $250,000 additional cost on top of the basic. They never told me the basic cost of their field, but if it's $1 million, add on 250 more.
And I would say that I asked Tower Hill, and they said it was not particularly difference in cost between the things they were considering. So that's the information. I want to just turn it back to the board. If the board has questions, I just, in the interest of getting all the information out there and synthesizing it quickly. Are there any questions from the board? Because this will have to come back to the board, because I'm betting it's over the whatever $15,000 mark.
500,000.
No, but it's over the market which the board has to,
Yeah, the statute refers to a 500,000
Okay. project.
There's another process, which basically is pre-qualifying the vendors before we actually start a bid process. So, you know, the administration has done some background on that as well.
so it will have to come from the board for us to go through the process, so there's no particular vote perhaps tonight, but if there's questions to inform the board, I'm turning it over to the board first. Sorry, Emily.
So I guess I'd like to know where in the process we are. I know we had the vote, but it sounds like the types of fill have not been determined yet. So that would be something that, you know, we would have meetings about and the public would have input on and all this. So where, like, what is going on now? And
Sure. Yeah, so currently where we're at is we're collecting bids and we're doing what are called bid specs. And so we're figuring out exactly, you know, what can the vendors provide and what are we actually looking for. And so the next step is, as Frank pointed out, is we're going to come to the board with what's called a pre-qualify. So we're going to come to you with 3 different vendors and what they can do. You know, our plan is to make one of those at least an organic-based substance. I can't use the word rock fill because that's a patent, that's a name. But so I'm going to use the blanket term, whether it's encapsulated crumb, whatever it is. So we're going to come to you with some options and some prices. And then after you pre-qualify those bids, then we do a formal bid process, and then we go. Yeah, you know, so you know, right now we're proceeding based on the vote in June. You know, we're proceeding. Our next step is to bring you pre-qualified bids.
Pre-qualified vendors, right?
Vendors, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and the statute's pretty clear. It's a 60-day window minimum from what Steve is indicating. You essentially request vendors to present their qualifications. The board selects who you feel is sufficient, meets your criteria for likely to succeed. That kicks off a 60-day timeline where you will make your decision on who you actually select within 30 days, no sooner than 30 days. And then you set a bid opening date at least 30 days after that. So the shortest timeline is a 60-day window. It can go much longer depending on the board's interests.
This is a clear question. I'm not familiar with the different materials, but when I watch a football game, an NFL game, and a player drags their foot across, this black stuff comes up. What is that?
So in most of the NFL stadiums, it's all crumb rubber. So when you see the splash,
And that's what you're talking about?
that's crumb rubber and sand. It's a sand crumb rubber mix. So depending on the type of synthetic surface, there's different companies and they believe in different mixtures. Some fields might be 60-40 crumb rubber sand. Some might be 50-50. Some might be 70-30. But they all have different splash qualities. So that's crumb rubber field. You will also see that same splash in organic and any other type. So you're seeing the infield splash up. So a field's made up of fibers which hold the infill, which attach to a backing. So you're seeing that infill splash.
Is there any other board?
I've been on the BUHS board for quite a while, and so I've watched this whole process develop. And I think our student athlete here really spoke well to the issue. My son was an athlete at BUHS. And because of the topography, we just don't have the field space. That's one thing. And the other thing is, this field would guarantee a greater degree of gender equality. Right now, it's used for football. Well, there are no women that play football. So it would be able to be used by the field hockey. We cannot have a soccer playoff game at Brattleboro now because in what was just mentioned about Kenny Field, you can't have a playoff game where part of the field is the dirt infield. So that's also true of field hockey. So it's, and another plug is, which I noticed from the information that Christina sent me, was that it reduces a lot of the cost of watering, of fertilizer application, which of course in the state of Vermont is huge with all the problems that Lake Champlain has. And also, mowing, and then the very limited use for that space. And athletics, as many other things in high school, is very important for a large number of people. I mean, you have art programs, you have music programs, you have athletic programs, and if somebody happens to be an athlete, doesn't matter. If you have more availability of time, quality time spent on a beautiful pitch, it really is an advantage.
So seeing no more board, if you plan on speaking or asking questions to this, you could raise your hand so I can get a count and divide the time, because it's 8:30 and anybody served on the board with me knows that after 9 o'clock it gets ugly. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to go with 90 seconds for everyone. Please try to choose your words carefully. Sean loves to keep time, and he will hold me accountable in an email tomorrow morning if I am not cutting you off. So,
Point of order.
yes.
You've just given the opposition, I mean, those in favor of turf, a presentation time. It doesn't seem fair to those of us who have concerns about it. We don't have equal time to rebut their proposal, 90 seconds.
Well, I think a lot of the proposal was the historical perspective of the process, which was a public concern, and I think that part is not, I don't think anybody's debating the facts of the part of the presentation so that the board could understand, because this board's brand new. We have not been here, except for Ann and Sean, we have not been here for the process. So the first point of clarification was, how did this come to pass and what has gone on? So I don't think that's a pro or con, just understanding the process for the board.
It's a pro statement, and this is not a new debate. Mount Greylock Regional School, 6 days ago, had a debate, a true debate. Doctors on both sides arguing pro and con. I don't see that we have that chance here.
Well, if people need more time, but if I take 15 people, a minute and a half, I'm getting pretty close to what their presentation was asked to be. So I think I'm getting pretty close to that because it was divided among 3 people. And I was tapping my watch because they went over their time, as I will tap my watch for people here. But if people feel like they need extra time, we're going to go through. Maybe people will use less time. We can table the motion and postpone it to another meeting. But we have preschoolers that need to get Medicaid funding. We have a full agenda, and I need to make sure this happens, and that's a priority of the board as well. So I'm happy to table it. We're not approving a field or not approving a field tonight, so we'll take public comment at future meetings on this, and the bid will come to the board, so it's not the end of the discussion. I don't think we'll have these gentlemen at every meeting.
Thanks.
So I want to make sure those questions get answered.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
I just wanted to sort of expand on what you just said, which is, well, I thought that we were coming here and they were going to say, this is what we're putting on the field. And I understand the concerns, the health concerns, and I understand the benefits, and it's a serious thing and it's going to affect a lot of people. But I felt a little bit better when I heard that they were going to come back to the board with some options, and then we could try to determine which ones would best suit our community and the needs of the community, all areas. So.
Yes, I'm recognizing you. You just state your name. And
Henry Zucchini, Brattleboro. I'm also a teacher at the school too. Just to be very clear, as far as this board is concerned, Emily, to respond to your question, that vote that was on the 25th does not bind you as a board to anything as far as spending. You still have the right to decide. You're not now in a process of accepting bids and then only decide that. You still have a right as a board to decide whether you are not going to spend this money. So just be very clear about that. You seem confused. I don't know if the board members are confused, but that's the reality where you're at now. It's not of what you're going to select from the pot. It's you have to decide whether this money is going to be spent that way. And that's not, that vote on the 25th is binding on this board, to be clear about that. Economists think of in terms of opportunity costs. So if you're spending this $1.5 million on this field, and then in 8 years, because the field's going to be used very heavily as they described, you'll need a new field in 8 years, so that'll be another $1 million+. Economists think of opportunity costs. If you're spending $2 million here on what Frank Rocker referred to as the reserve fund, which I assume is a kitty for the entire district, then you're taking that $2 million, you're saying we value this over other things. And as a teacher in the high school, there are things I've observed in talking to my fellow colleagues. Many of them do not agree about putting the turf field in, have very strong feelings, they're not here tonight unfortunately, about not putting this turf field in because they feel there are things in the high school they need as part of their to help them teach, and I'm sure that's true in other schools too as well. So it isn't as if there's an endless source of money and we can kind of just decide. It's $1 million+ now, and then in 8 years, who knows where the school budgets will be with rising healthcare costs. Will you have the $1 million, $1.5 million in 8 years to replace this field? And by the way, that field that gets withdrawn gets put into a landfill, right? So let's be clear on that. Whatever material it is, let's hope if it does get put forward, it's an organic material and not from rubber, which is highly toxic. But that goes into a landfill in 8 years. So just keep that in mind too. Yeah, and I just want to say that if it is from rubber, you can say all you want, the reality that it's not, it's safe, blah, 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 but as they intimated, it has known toxins in it. It has multiple carcinogens. Those crumb rubber fields are a waste product of the petrochemical industry, and it's a great way for them to loose that. Oh, look, we've got a great way to get rid of these tires and shred them. Now you can play on them. That's essentially what you'd be agreeing to if you went with crumb rubber. It's a waste product of the petrochemical industry. We'd be like, oh yeah, let's put it right here in the middle of BHS and let's play on it. So thanks.
I'm sorry. Yes. Point of clarification. Crumb rubber is not a synthetic product. It is not a byproduct. It is actually a natural product that comes out of trees. That's all I'm saying.
So I think we're probably not going to. We can table that.
But I mean, you keep calling it synthetic, and everyone's saying things. But crumb rubber in itself is actually a natural product from trees
So
that grow.
I guess. I don't think there's a petrochemical expert here, and so I'm going to table that and ask that at a later time somebody lets us know exactly what is in the crumb rubber, because things are called things that I don't know what they are, and so if there's a petrochemical, is there a crumb rubber synthetic field that can give me a 1-minute answer on that to stop the debate? You're a crumb rubber expert, okay? Give it to me.
No, I just wanted to reply to one thing Chris Sawyer, Brattleboro, the athletic director.
You're replying to me, though.
Oh. So, just one point of order with a third-generation synthetic turf that we have now. We're seeing these fields last 14 years, not 8 years. The warranty for these fields are 8 years, but generally we're seeing 14 years of use. Rutland put theirs in 2008. They have no thoughts yet of replacing it. Chicopee High School just replaced their turf field. It cost $300,000. So the price on replacing the soil is going down. So just a little different than 8 years.
I'm sorry, I was calling up Priscilla behind you. Sorry, yes, all right.
Priscilla Speck from Dummerston. I just wanted to say two things. I think I disagree with you, and I'm really thankful that you found this other alternative, because temperature is important. Those September days on grass, kids really, the trainer is moving around from field to field with kids in field hockey, in soccer, in football. So temperature is important, and I would really challenge you guys to do a good job of looking into the one that's cooler. We've had college kids play on turf fields in soccer. We have 2 daughters, and the temperatures are ridiculous. And so it is important. Please don't put that aside. And in the articles that I read, it doesn't act, I would think that the turf would be, the tire would be, not good for kids and not good for adults and everything else. But then when you think about what else goes into keeping a grass field up, it's not just your back lawn that you don't add anything to. So we just have to remember that we still are talking about chemicals.
So as a point of clarification, I would just like to say, Priscilla, that I actually find that 20-degree difference personally really important because children die on hot fields. As a chair, I try not to lead the conversation too terribly much by weighing in when I'm just reporting information.
Thank you.
That was my intention, but I think that's very important, and I understand heat stress on children is not good. I'm going to try to go back and forth. We have not heard from Kate O'Connor.
I'm going to be less than 9 seconds. My name is Kate O'Connor, and I'm from Brattleboro. And my main point I want to make is about the process, that I actually kind of disagree with how the process has been described, that the voters approved it, the voters approved it. If you actually go back and look at what was in the BOHS budget, it was Natowich Field resurfacing. And the real, so you can say we voted to resurface Natowich Field, but we didn't necessarily vote to do a synthetic field. When we did have the vote at the BOHS number 6 final board meeting, that was to take out a $750,000 loan to resurface the field, and there were like, what, 67 people at that meeting. Yes, it went past by a voice vote. I think there were 3 of us that voted no. So I think it's a little over-exaggeration to say it's been approved by the voters over and over again. So I would just urge you folks to look at the process, look at the price, and really get some more input from the public before you go through with this. Thank you.
I am calling on you.
Okay. Let's talk about cancer first. Yeah, there's debates about this.
I'm sorry, can you state your name and where you're from?
Tim Maciel, Brattleboro.
Talk to us, Tim, please.
Sure.
I can't hear you when you're talking that way.
Okay. The National Institute of Health, in a report called Synthetic Turf Fields, Crumb Rubber, and Alleged Cancer Risk, the authors state, quote, recently the crumbs have been implicated in causing cancer in adolescents and young adults who use the fields, particularly lymphoma. This concern has led to the initiation of large-scale studies by local and federal governments that are expected to take years to complete. This was December 2017. So the jury is very much out on whether synthetic fields cause cancer or not. Let's talk about concussions. 1 out of 5 concussions are caused by the head banging against the turf. And the Orthopedic Journal of, well, that's a different study. Let's get to ACL injuries. Studies show that artificial turf, NFL players are 91% of NFL players against turf because they know that it increases the likelihood of ACL injuries. The Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine, very recently, in an article called Effects of Changes in Artificial Turf on Sports Injuries in Male Soccer Players, their conclusion is after conversion to artificial turf, there was significant increase in the incidence of upper extremity trauma. After refurbishing with additional rubber chips, the incidence of lower extremity strain was still significant. I urge you consider the sources of the studies. I think the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine is valid. I think the Institute of Health is valid. And to quote a doctor from that debate down in Massachusetts, Dr. Nick Wright cited studies that show that knee injuries can increase as much as 300% on artificial turf. These are not anecdotes. This is empirical evidence. So I think we have a lot more to say about it, and I hope that there's further debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your plea for peer-reviewed research as a former scientist. Thank you. Other comments? I'm going to go back for some. Dick.
Well, I first want to say, and since I know Lyle has 3 children, and I have 2 that went through the high school, and they played on those fields, they're well-adjusted kids, so they didn't really suffer from playing up on those fields or up at the Familari field. And so some of this hyperbole, which we heard earlier in the meeting, and then somebody standing on mud. Kids don't like to stand on mud. They'll stand anywhere they want if they want to play. One of the things also that concerns me is the dollar figure here. How did you come to the figure of 700, this delta between 750 and, is it $1.5 million or $1.25 million that was approved by the voters that you're not bound to spend?
So the cost of the field has not been bid, so we won't know the cost until a bid process. But the administration has done a fair amount of research on it, as you've heard, looking at other facilities, looking at other installations, and the $1 million estimate is what's considered reasonable. We won't know what the actual price is until we go through a bid process, as with any
You
project.
put the horse before the cart. Did you get an engineering study on impervious surface and what's going to happen there? Did you work with the town at all?
So that's, I think, Robert.
I'm looking at you. I can talk out of both sides. Did you look at, well, you weren't there.
I was not there.
So that's why I'm not asking you the
But you
question.
can ask me, has this been done, and I can direct the question to.
So what about impervious surface, which is a huge issue in the town of Brattleboro, and I would suspect in the other towns? Was there any study done to the impact of the impervious surface and the cost of what the drainage would be to do on the field? Did you have any engineers working with you other than non-engineering people making phone calls that don't really understand the process?
So, do you have a 2-second answer to that would clear? Are you done with your?
I would defer to Robert and Clark in terms of the, we have a project in the garage, the storage shed garage. We're in the process of a permit review on the UHS facility. The practice field you heard about, raises these issues, and there has been the review board, engagement on these issues. So these things are anticipated, but until we have, a project timeline and an implementation plan, we're not going to go out and spend the district's money until we know we have a project to move forward.
Well, without doing an RFP, and then appropriating money before you do an RFP to know what we're going to get, and any other options that you would have gotten in an RFP. And then the last question I have is, because this is a synthetic field, are we going to have a reduction in staff because we're not going to need as many people taking care of the fields because we have this synthetic field? So would that reflect in the budget?
So thank you, Dick. I will put those on action items for us to discuss as we're moving forward and looking at bids and really assessing the full cost. Thank you for your input. Ron Speck in the back.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. So I'm Ron Speck. I live in Dummerston. I had 2 girls that went through the BUHS 4 years, and they played on varsity sports all 4 of their years. I presently coach on the JV girls soccer team. I've been there. I've been coaching in the area with youth soccer for the last 15 years. And to me, it's an embarrassment to have games on Tenney Field with an infield on it. It's a liability. It's inappropriate. It's too narrow. It's too small. The girls like to play there. The boys like to play there because of the light. You get parents who can come at night after they're done with work. You can't do that during the afternoon. So having a lighted field is a big deal to a lot of the players. And it doesn't just serve the players, it serves their classmates who like to come and cheer them on, it serves their parents that like to come and watch the games too. I don't know about the anecdotal thing about the toxicity of the rubber crumb thing. I play it on it myself during the winter time down at the Dome. And it's all anecdotal, so we don't know. And I'm all for using an organic type of replacement. But you only have enough, you have to make a decision. You can't not do something about the present state of the soccer field that's used for lacrosse, soccer, and field hockey. It's inappropriate. It's been way too long that it's been something that's way too inadequate and I think dangerous. playing on. That's not just smooth out there. You've got this berm where it drops down into the infield for the boys baseball field. And I was disappointed to find out that we can't move those old bleachers back because they're historically preserved. You could make that field bigger, wider, longer, and then have a natural turf field. So if you don't do that, if that has been knocked down by the powers to be, whatever they were, you've got to do something here. Central location was well pointed out by Gus and others about how it's a central location. They got to be able to change, use the bathroom, this type of thing. And it's not appropriate to be out somewhere where there's no facilities and that type of thing. So we're talking safety, we're talking appropriateness. We don't have playoff games there because it's a field that's inadequate. And when coaches come, they don't like to come and play on that field because it's ridiculous. And I know that many of you are not involved with soccer like we are, but I'd like to make sure that something is done, that the board makes a decision to finally upgrade the situation that is woefully ignored for many, many years, and some kind of decision has to be made. And I want to do the safer one too. I want to know information, ACL injuries and rubber crumb, this type of thing. I want to know that too. My first priority is safety for my players that I coach and I teach and I care for. But this is something that I see needs to be done. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for your advocacy for girls soccer for 15 years in our area. Wow. Jamie, sorry, yeah.
Jamie Comtois, Putney. I just wanted to say I'm really excited to see young athletes here. Thank you for being a student here. That's awesome. And for the passion and the research you've all done. I know how hard it is to facilitate a process that the community is freaking out about. So I get that. I want to ask that the process is super clarified and written down and documented so we know how to present our concerns and when to. And right now it feels very amorphous. I'm really wondering about RFP, the request for proposal, if that included a request for companies who actually know how to do alternatives. So if that is already, is that coming?
You gotta talk to her.
Is that coming?
I believe that Mr. Perrin stated that at least one of the vendors would be proposing an organic, meaning sustain. I don't know what word to use because organic could be alternative, more natural alternative to an alternative to crumb rubber. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. So every synthetic turf manufacturer has different options, starting with crumb rubber, the coated crumb rubber, to TPE, to other virgin rubbers, to organics, to silica. So every company has different options.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because in my experience, if the RFP doesn't include the request for the alternative, magically the 3 proposals you get, it won't be there. And if you weren't looking for it, magically the organic will be $500,000 more than if you put an RFP that called for that and you got competitive bids for it. So I do want to say that I have so many questions that are not appropriate for right now. I want to know the equity concerns, why women don't get access to that field now. Like that's an interesting word for me to hear a lot of. Comparison of the field time of what it looks like now versus what it will be, because if it's a Friday night, that's a premium time, so I don't understand how you schedule, how does that work? So it'd be really interesting to see the field time comparison spreadsheet. I would love to know, and I echo this gentleman's concern, it's time to, it's clearly time to fix it, but I just didn't understand why natural, like I hear the 35-day argument about why we wouldn't use natural turf, but I'm just really concerned that, like, okay, let's that doesn't seem to be a dispute. Let's get it flat, let's get it level, let's get it safe, let's have the people to have a place to change and bathrooms and everything. And so anyway, I just want to say that that is very clear that needs to happen. It's just that there needs to be a clear process so that we understand, and a centralized place for the data, because I don't even know where to get my answers right now.
Get back to the communications today.
Next question.
Yes.
So I liked what Jamie said about being very specific about the RFPs. And I guess I wonder when we do receive these RFPs in, will we be here, because I didn't really understand this grandstand, like we can't move the grandstands back or something, I don't know anything about that, but is it the case that we're not gonna receive any bids that would be for a natural field or natural field replacement? Are we gonna see like, oh, here are bids, but these are the cons from this, here are the bids for the organic field, here are the bids for the rubber field, or is it just we're getting fields that are non-regular grass?
It's my understanding these bids are only for non-regular grasses. Would that be correct?
Yeah, correct. So resurfacing, even though we can consider any type of resurfacing based off of what I'm hearing, we're only considering bids for certain types of resurfacing.
That's my understanding.
Is
As
that
it currently stands.
I guess I would ask, is that what we want to receive as a board? Because if it's not, then we should probably be directing somebody to receive a more comprehensive, bids, a few bids from each category, and then we can make a more comprehensive decision. Because it is a new board, so not all of us were there last time, but maybe other people would like to weigh in, and then we can figure out if that's what we want to do.
So I'm wondering if we could finish taking public comment, just to let everybody have their time and not, unfortunately, we're starting to lose board members at 9 o'clock, so we can do that, and then we can just,
Sorry, yeah, I
so that we
didn't know if that was
get
the time.
through
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the public
Sorry.
comment. So I've seen Jody's hand up for a while.
Jody Normando, Dummerston. I have a lot of questions, but I won't ask them at this time. What I'm concerned about getting options. I understand thoroughly, being a mom and a grandmom of soccer players, women and male. I understand the tennis field problem, I understand all of this. However, I wonder how often what's happened as far as really looking at the options. What could we do at tennis field? I know the grandstand is a problem, but with historical being a grandstand, but can it be moved? Can it be changed? Has anybody really looked at all of those options? Because that field has always been horrible for soccer. I also want to, I maybe disagree with Ron back here, Dr. Speck back here, but I still think that you need to talk to the people of the Familari field. That is going to be a resource down the road. If you're not using it now, that's going to be a resource down the road that you will need sometime. And I don't know whether anybody's really sat down and talked to them as far as what it would cost to own that, and then what it would cost to redo some of that, and put a bathroom in so the girls can change. But those are some of the things that I would like to know right now about those two fields, and I really would like to see the natural options rather than the plastic options and the rubber options, which do, from my research, which is not as extensive as yours, but there are issues, health issues with those fields.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Gus Williams from Guilford. Just about the fact that we play on other schools in our league have turf fields. So communities just like us have gone through this and made this decision. I think other schools are considering it. The article I mentioned earlier is from Martha's Vineyard. There's 6 schools in their division, and 4 of them already have turf fields. And it was written by a grandmother doing her own research in her time. It's a great article, and so there are people and communities like this that have just gone through it. A fact in that article is that there are 12,000 fields already in the United States, turf fields, in use, and thousands being added. As far as the grandstands, and that was mentioned, the grandstands has been mentioned a few times tonight, and we're talking about 2 different sets. There's one on the football field, and there's the tennis field grandstands. The tennis field for the baseball is the big green one that you can see and is a historical landmark, and there's a team trying to preserve that. And so earlier this year when we were going to propose ideas, could we push that back? Could we try and redo that, make the outfield bigger? That's where we ran into issues with them. As far as resurfacing the football field, yeah, you could do it with grass. It would be expensive. It'd be close to $500,000, and it would just get destroyed again. A synthetic turf field can, like Rutland's, is lasting 13 years right now. it could go 12 to 14 years without being replaced. And it's not a full cost of replacing it again at $1.2 million. It's about half that. So that's really all I wanted to touch up on. Answer some questions.
I'm irritated and confused about this great accord of priority that's being given to the sports program, the intramural sports program. I asked the chair to request any kind of study that indicates that intramural sports are necessary or appropriate for education. Kids can get exercise, that helps them get a good education, that keeps them alert for their education. But intramural sports are not a priority and have no bearing on education. They should not be even considered in part of our budget. Intramural sports, maybe. Now we've heard a lot of oblique arguments about silly things like keeping the soccer shoes of other teams clean by spending $1 million on turf. It's absurd. And we've also heard that we need the turf in order to provide quality time for the people in our community. That's also absurd. We can find our own quality time. We don't need to spend $1 million on pollutive plastic for that. And then when I also hear about all the other communities that are spending $300,000, $700,000, $1 million, $800,000 at a time on these kinds of things, I'm reminded about Act 46. It is exactly the kind of frivolous, gross expense which has brought the state down on us with Act 46. And it's a shame we're considering it here because the next thing is just going to be equally wasteful and pollutive. If we didn't have this kind of habit of spending $1 million on silly things, we wouldn't have had Act 46.
Hi, I'm Ellen Strong from Putney, and I just wanted to say this has been really interesting. We moved here from Austin, Texas 2 years ago, and I wanted to speak to the value of having a really strong athletics program in a school. I'm Texas, it's a whole different world as far as how much you would spend on a football field. But one of the reasons we chose to move to Putney and to this overall school district was not just because of the awesome forest program and the small class sizes, but was my kids would have opportunity to really participate in athletics in a smaller school, whether that be through soccer or running or Nordic skiing. So I just want to say, I do think there's value as we're losing population and we're losing families to having a really vibrant athletics program and having a place for community to gather. I was a student athlete and it taught me a lot about working as a team and being successful in school and bringing the community together. So, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Vermont. Jesse, I'm glad you like this once too, and you got to present, so I kind of.
So this isn't coming. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Laura Chapman, still from Putney. This isn't coming from a judgmental place, but I would be really curious in seeing the breakdown of what we spend on athletics, how much this is going to increase it, the per pupil spending that would be applied in this scenario, and comparing that to what we spend on the arts and other extracurriculars, because though I see value in sports, not personally, but I do see value in sports for others, I also see that we as society tend to value it over sometimes other programmatic options, and so I'd be really curious to see what the comparison is before we go forward spending.
Too bad. Oh, Fred, you're still here.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be answered tonight either. I just, for future reference, I'll come back.
We have a brand new accounting system, so it's actually, once we figure out all the codes, it might actually be easier to tally that up somehow in some way. new accounting codes in our
I hear new accounting system and figuring out cooking like so in 3 years.
It was a very thorough presentation last week. I think I can make my way through it. I just got to get my hands at the software so I could run those numbers for you, but I think it's an interesting question as our board works on those bigger questions about our priorities and our mission, which we haven't had a chance to do yet because we have been admired in making sure that the schools can open August 28th. So we're hoping to have a board retreat at some point so we can kind of sync up and really begin being a functional board and not just putting our fingers where the water comes through. Thank you. Jody, have you spoken on the motion? Yes, you have. So I'm sorry.
I just have a question.
A clarifying question you may ask. Don't turn it into a statement.
I'm not going to. I just want to know, and maybe I missed it, if they do this synthetic field, if it will be large enough and if it will be lined for lacrosse, soccer, football, and field hockey.
Correct.
Thank you. Is that okay, Madam Chair?
That's okay. Thank you for taking a question. So, I believe Emily had a motion that she was proposing way back when. That was, and
So I'm gonna move that when we get RFPs for the process of resurfacing the field, that we get RFPs for synthetic surfaces that include a natural option and additionally a non-synthetic surface option. Does that kind of state it out? I think so. Totally.
Tim, did you get that motion so that I can read it back? Sorry.
Hold on 1 second.
Right now. You know, if you're here anyway, you could be earning money doing this job. There's various members of the community that seem to be here all the time.
I think I was pretty close. What I had was that Emily moved that the board, when the board seeks RFPs, that the RFPs list alternative options as well as natural turf options.
Well, natural turf options and non-turf options, right? Because it would have to be grass or.
So grass, you mean by non-turf?
It's all turf, so you have to actually say.
That's what I mean, yeah. You say
Synthetic
turf versus natural.
So synthetic,
Because I want three. I want synthetic. Could be rubber. I don't know about that, but like synthetic, and then we talked about all these other options that God knows what's in them, but cork and all these other things. And then we talked about grass. So I don't know how to word that, but I'd like to see proposals that we, again, as Jamie said, if we request proposals and we don't, if we don't request a proposal for the cork option, we might not get it. So I want to make sure that we get three options. How to put that?
the motion is that the RFPs will include requests for natural grass,
synthetic natural products.
Crumb rubber, the traditional turf,
Yeah, sure.
and then alternatives to the crumb, natural alternatives to the crumb rubber field.
Yes.
Phil.
I heard from the back with attention to the temperature of the turf.
I think there's a whole range of concerns that the board should be considering about health, and so I don't want to limit that RFP. I think that's the work of the board then and the professionals to look at all the health concerns and make sure that we are well informed before we make our decision. So I don't want to just say that because then it puts everything else, the effect of fertilizer on the effect of mowing on the environment, the effect of all these things that we are doing our best to take a look at the project.
Sustainability.
The sustainability of the project in a very global way. The health of our children, the community, the environment, all those things that we always do. Does that seem like a decent motion?
Let me read it back to you again. It still didn't get quite the way I think people wanted it. When the board seeks RFPs, that RFPs include requests for natural grass, crumb rubber, and alternative synthetic turf options?
Alternative natural.
Natural infill options.
Yeah, that's the word, infill.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to let the experts, if there's a question. Is there a second on the motion? Sorry, is there a second on the motion before we start discussion? Sorry. Thank you, Thomas.
So, part of the reason we're looking to do a synthetic surface is because we know that a natural grass surface can't hold up to the wear and tear that we're putting on it. So that option, well, I understand the reasoning and the sentiment behind it. We're not seeking to do that because all that's going to do is put us where we are now. So if we go through and we resod Natterbush Field, we're not going to remove any of our options. We're not going to increase playing time. We're not going to increase access to it for anybody. We'll lose the field for 2 years because it can't be used while it's being. That's a whole different issue. But the issue, so for us, the issue, if we go with a grass option, that's a very separate product. So if we determine that we're not going to do a turf field, then I think we would come back after that and talk perhaps about grass options, or who knows. But I don't know that a grass option on this RFP is within the scope of what we're looking at, because we're not looking at a turf installation. We're not looking at a natural turf installation. So I guess I would rather, if it's possible, to go ahead with proposals for the different types of synthetic surface. If none of those are suitable, then we're quite literally back to square one. Does that make sense?
So is there a motion, because there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, and so we will debate this motion, is there a motion to remove the language, to strike the language grass turf from that motion?
If there is, I want to speak against it.
Okay, I'm looking for
But I wanted to speak anyway.
Okay, and then is there a second on that amendment? There's no such thing as a friendly amendment, so you can move to strike language. There's no such thing as a friendly amendment, so it's just, you can do it in a friendly voice. You're moving to amend it by striking language. There's no such thing as a friendly amendment, so. But you can do it in a friendly way.
Is that seconded? And then
Yes, it's
discussed?
seconded and discussed, and then we vote on that motion. So is there a second for that motion? Sean made a motion, yeah.
I'll second so we can talk about it.
So Ann has seconded it. Is there discussion? Sean?
I think what Mr. Perrin just referred to is very important to realize. Synthetic turf field, just to reiterate, would make it possible for both male and female, or male and women athletes to have all the playing time they needed. If you kept it just as a natural grass turf field, it's going to be used for football. And football is 20 games in the fall. And then it could be used for some lacrosse games in the spring, but then it has to just sit and wait till it regenerates during the summer. So the whole genesis of the problem is that we have more sports involve students than we have field space. And to accommodate those student athletes, we need a field that can be used to a much greater degree than we have now. I've been to soccer games, and it's ridiculous when the ball goes on an infield of a baseball. And my son played lacrosse at over at Bayback. And it was very, very inadequate. As a matter of fact, people commented, "Are you sure you should be playing a varsity game on this field?" I don't think they do it anymore because of all the things that are reiterated.
David?
Well, I would like to leave that in there because I'm not convinced that there isn't a stronger grass that might a stronger kind of grass might hold up better. I know they've been inventing stuff on golf courses that are, even the golf clubs don't pull it out. But more importantly, I think there's a question about how long our high school football program is going to exist. We've seen a decline in the number of kids and the number of the teams that are around the state, and that may remove that altogether. But those are really side questions. I think it's really important for everybody that doesn't know this. I can't remember how many years you said, Sean, that the high school board has been talking about this and building this and coming with this idea, and now these gentlemen are here again, presenting all this information. This is a new board. This is a whole new ball game, and we're asking questions that are going to be answered first. This is going to take a long time to decide this, and I think everybody needs to be right. I just want to read through a list of the questions that I wrote down, things that I'm going to want answers to, even if I have to find out myself, but we're going to need answers to. Is crumb rubber toxic? Temperature, drainage and impervious engineering, staff reduction due to less maintenance, opportunity costs and comparing athletics with other areas, arts, foreign language, dual enrollment programs, other things we spend money on. What opportunities might we be losing? All this information needs to go someplace. This needs to be at a separate place on our website so that everybody that wants to see it can see it. That's true of all of our minutes and committee report stuff too, which so far is kind of hiding in our computers. Bids for a grass rebuild. Should we get options? The Familari purchase and upgrade to the facility. Comparing, let's see, where's the other one? Okay, well, that's just a list of things that I wrote down that I want to know, that I'm going to need answers to. And this is going to take a long time. We're not going to get this settled tonight, whatever we may think. And despite all the work that's gone on in the past and the clearness of your goal, we're not the people that have been listening to this for 6 years. We're hearing from a whole bunch of other people that say things like synthetic in Vermont. Why not just buy another field? And we're hearing all these different things. These are all questions that we're going to have to answer. And so I would like to. I don't want to take the natural grass off because I know it's something that this community would want us to look into. So I'm going to vote against that amendment.
Thank you, David. Point of clarification, our minutes are on the website and posted. So you made it sound like we don't post our minutes and they're stuck on our computers somewhere, and I just want a point of clarification that we are complying with open meeting law.
The committee minutes are on.
Committee minutes are up there and posted usually within 5 days. One got lost on the way, but
I was trying to find them
committee
today.
minutes are posted. And then I linked committee minutes on your preparatory email, but the link goes right to the WSESU website. So.
Where are the committee meetings? Are they still on the same?
So it's within the same. As a point of clarification, I will answer you. The committee minutes are listed. And thank you, Lyle and central office staff. They have revamped the website so it's easier to get to the WSESD. We are the top board, and it says who we represent, so it's much easier to find. When you click on that, when you go to the school boards, you click on that top one, and you go to agendas, and it shows all the committees. They're warned meetings within 48 hours unless there's something going on, and then it could be a special meeting, 24 hours as you're familiar with. And then the minutes are showing up there within 5 calendar days.
Thank you.
And you know what a stickler I am for that, Jody, so you know we are compliant.
Oh, Barb will be on your case if you're not.
Is it a point of clarification, or are you speaking?
Just a quick comment, 45 seconds, about education.
You have 25.
25, all right. Tomorrow at 9:15 a.m. I am heading to Burton Academy. I was nominated this past spring by Mr. Perrin and Mr. Sawyer to be a part of the Vermont Principals Association, VPA, Student Athletic Advisory Committee. I just wanted to talk about that is a perfect example of athletics and curriculum. I'm with 16 other students from across the state. It's a little conference and working on leadership and how to better the sport and sportsmanship. And so I just wanted to say that that's what I'll be doing tomorrow all day and meeting periodically throughout the school year to be a part of that co-curricular with athletics.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and congratulations on that, and thank you for your service on that. Back to the motion in hand. 9:20, the motion on a motion, people. So is there anybody else that wants to speak to the motion?
Chris Sawyer, I could speak to the motion in a couple of roles, as an athletic director and a taxpayer in Brattleboro. But as an athletic director, I understand that it's tough. You've just been newly elected. You do have a lot of questions, and hopefully we can answer those for you. But I would urge you not to put in a natural turf field into this amendment, because I think it would clutter a proposal. We've considered this a long time, and adding a natural turf field does not help our situation. It does not increase more fields, it does not increase more playing time, it does not allow more teams to have the same conditions. So it really does nothing. As a taxpayer, I would argue that spending $500,000 on something we already have might not be prudent or responsible. So I would just urge that we focus on synthetic field. It was proposed because it's the one type of field that can help us. And along with that proposal, yes, we would like to look at alternatives to chrome rubber, whether that be coated or natural or just other alternatives. But that's all. Natural turf just cannot really help us in our needs at this point.
Are you ready for a vote on the motion?
Could you clarify
The motion?
Yes, I mean, is the motion
Your motion, your
Okay.
amendment to the motion. The motion on the table is the amendment that we remove the natural grass from the RFP request. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion by Sean to remove the natural grass from the RFP, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against the motion, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Abstentions? The nays have it, the motion does not carry. We are back to the original motion by Emily Murphy-Cower, which is that the RFP contain 3 quotes for natural gas. I made it to 9:25, people. I left my house at 7 o'clock. Okay. Natural grass, crumb rubber infill, and sustainable alternatives to crumb rubber infill. That is the motion on the table. Yes, David.
I'd like to amend the motion to include an RFP on purchase and upgrading of the Familari property.
So here's where I am. I just called it natural gas, it's 9:25. And so I'm feeling like this is going to take another probably 20 minutes when I take comments on that motion. So I'm checking with the board because it's 9:25 and we have a lot of work that we still need to accomplish. We cannot, so I'm considering tabling this motion and this discussion until our next meeting. So we've spent an hour and a half on it, more than an hour and a half. Yes,
I
David.
would withdraw my motion to amend and move that we table this to the first meeting in September.
First meeting in September? You said, I'm sorry. First meeting in September?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we won't talk about it in 2 weeks.
Right.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I guess I would wonder, since we already kind of offered some spending, right, or we said that this money could be spent, when is the RFP process going on? Like, is it already in motion? And because they said like timelines, like 60 days, 90 days, and would tabling this till September mean we only get certain options? Or is it just stops the process full force and RFPs aren't going to be gathered? Does somebody know that?
Yeah, so what the administration was looking for is direction from the board tonight as to whether we should formalize a request for pre-qualifying at least 3 vendors that can follow up with what the analysis that was presented on the June 12th UHS annual meeting and approved by the public. So what the tabling the motion will do is it doesn't interrupt a kind of a commitment that's already been made to a particular group of vendors. What it does is it pushes a bid process later into the fall, and it's not necessarily a problem. I think if the board does come to consensus on a process and a specification, once we get much past December, it's probably hard to imagine putting a project into play for the next school season if we go much past that. So September is fine. It's kind of the tail end of what would allow a timeline for an improvement next July, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
So I would propose that we keep our agenda very clean that night. Don't have any crises that require our attention in the meanwhile, after the first few days of school. How does that sound? Great.
Thanks for the
So there's the motion to there's a motion to table on the floor. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to table till the first meeting in September, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The turf discussion is tabled to the first meeting in September. So that's with the agenda. Thank you all for your input on that and your research. Back to unfinished business. The BAM's local school protocol. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry.
Has been sitting here waiting for her presentation since 6 o'clock.
So, so we'll go, if it's okay with what, we'll go to 8A now and then go back to approved policies.
So for it. Hello, everybody. I'm Deb Gass. I'm your Head Start Director of Early Education Services, and you'll be hearing much more from me as the year goes on because the new board is our new green team. So on that note, our fiscal year, Frank and Lyle and I did a lot of finessing and working last year to align our fiscal year, which used to be March 1st to February 28th, to a July 1st date, which was really pretty monumental in the federally funded world. And we have been unable to leverage funds because you own some property, or we need to transfer property from the Brattleboro Town School District to the new board. And the Head Start Regional Office will not release those funds until we do that because they have a federal interest in the property. So we've been speaking with attorneys, and I think Lyle and Frank can probably talk about that, but that's why I'm here.
I wish I could have put you sooner on the agenda. As a Head Start, getting money to our children, that's so much. So, Lyle, did you want to address that with the board?
So, Deb and I had another, you and I had a conversation with Mark Ottinger. Deb and I had another conversation with Mark Ottinger. We've been sending him some documents. He's brought in a real estate expert lawyer from his firm into the conversation. We've sent him documentation that shows that we are now a merged district, that Head Start has been part of the Brattleboro Town. Now Brattleboro Town's part of the new district. The new district has a new name. But from what I'm understanding, Head Start needs to make sure that the property has been transferred. So when Christina and Ann and I talked with Mark Ottinger a while ago, we had two ways to do this. It was through quitclaim deed or warranty deed. When we talked with Mark and Randy this past week, Mark suggested if we want to get it done quickly so that we can ensure we're getting our Head Start money, we could go quitclaim deed, get it done, and then if there are properties that we're seeing like, oh, maybe there are some red flags with this, those we can go back and then do a warranty deed.
So I think I am not an attorney. Oh, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a real estate attorney. But the basic difference is the quitclaim deed. You don't do a whole full title search to make sure everything's clear. year. That was, as I recollect from a conversation a month ago, that was the major difference, and there was a big cost differential as well. The quitclaim deed, therefore, could happen. You get what you get, and if you have a toxic waste site, we are taking underneath there. I'm not saying you do, but in the crazy scenario, or if you have a, if you have a gold mine under there, it's ours. And
so I can maybe allay some of those fears, because the property is on Buck Drive, and we actually purchased it from Setka. And I think they purchased it from Dr. Buck, who built the building. So I think the buildings were constructed in the 1970s. So there's not a long history. And we have done a number of improvements on the property in the time that we've owned it. We have to do water testing. We have our own water filtration system. We've done lots of digging and all that. So we haven't found any gold, but we haven't found any toxic waste either. So I'm fairly confident that there are no skeletons in this closet.
Excuse my oversimplification at 9:30, but just so the board understands what we're making a decision on and possible. I like to take it to the nth degree. So you are asking the board, it sounds to me, that for this property we pursue a quitclaim deed?
Yep. We have started, Frank has put together a list of all of our properties that we own from Putney and Guilford. Of course, Brattleboro owns the most with their schools and B6 and the buildings there. So we're putting all of those together to send to Ottinger once we have the go-ahead.
So is it that the Head Start property needs to transfer by quitclaim deed, or do we have to think about that with all the properties?
We have to think about it with all the properties, but Head Start runs through Brattleboro Town.
Yeah.
Which is why Brattleboro Town also needs to be a part of this, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to go one way, just to get started and not finish.
So the immediate action one is the Head Start. Okay, so we have to make sure that the Head Start, in order to assure funding and make your life a lot easier, that property would be very beneficial to the district if the Head Start property would be transferred with a quitclaim deed.
Yes.
We do have the similar issue with Title I and Title IIA, the federal funds that are subgranted to all districts. And again, this is just Article 6 in the Articles of Formation. It said this should have been done by July 1st.
So I'm just wanting to have a full discussion about a quitclaim versus a warranty deed on all the properties, so the board is fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility, and I don't want to do it at 9:35 at night because I don't think that would be a good use of time. So I want to make sure that we're doing what needs to happen for Head Start tonight, and then we can put that on as an agenda item on a non-turf field discussion night. If that is okay. And I think that's what we talked about here is the transfer, the EES transfer of property is what's on the agenda, and I think this would be probably a 20 to 25 minute discussion, so I prefer to just...
When do you see the rest of the districts?
I think we could put it on the next agenda potentially, unless I hear differently, otherwise it's going to have to go to the second one in September, I would say.
And what is the next meeting?
21st is August 21st. But I wouldn't be surprised that some of this transfer is a time issue. And if it isn't done in a timely manner, we could be running into possible federal funds being not available. I don't want that.
That's why I'm requesting the quitclaim deed to get it done quickly versus the
Yeah.
warranty deed.
No, but I mean for all the transfers. In other words, the transfers is something that we've all known about forever. So if we put it on off beyond the time that it should be done and there are consequences, that would not be good.
Yeah, I am a little concerned about the federal fund programs are actually occurring now. The summer food service programs with federal money, the child nutrition programs, you mentioned Title I, Title IIA. So yeah, I am concerned that the board has not complied with the requirements of the law. The the office that Deb Gass has informed us has written to us and said, you must provide this documentation. I am concerned about knowing the federal monitoring requirements for compliance with receiving and spending federal funds, that oftentimes they don't forewarn you. They come in, they audit you 6 months from now, they look back and say, did you comply with the laws? And if you don't, they say this is an ineligible cost, you will pay for this out of a local budget. So, you know, I can't see the future, but I have had enough experience with administration of federal funds to know that that's the way that works.
I thank you for your informing our discussion. I would feel very remiss as chair if EE transfer of property was what was warned, and we moved forward with quit claim deeds or warranty deeds without having the board understand what that is, and having a discussion about it and hearing from the community. So, yeah, David?
So we need a motion to transfer the Buck Road, the Buck Drive property to WSESD from BTS, from Brattleboro Town School District. I move that we, and something about a quit claim.
The quit claim deed.
That we authorize a quit claim deed to transfer the property on Buck Drive, formerly owned by the Brattleboro Town School District, to the Wyndham Southeast School District.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Going back. Now can I go back to unfinished business last?
Yes, please.
Okay. 8A. The local school protocol, LSP3, directory information and military recruitment. I would entertain a motion.
I would move that the board adopt the LSP3 Directory Information and Military Recruitment.
Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ann.
Is that a question?
Sure, we'll discuss.
Yep. Is it time to discuss?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm happy to pass this, but it seems like it's duplication, because part of our required statutory obligation is to inform secondary students and their parents of the right to opt out of the federal requirement to contact military recruiters and institutions, blah, 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 blah. So it seems like a duplication, but let's get it done.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve LSP3, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. Moving down in the hopscotch agenda, 8D, policy review, D6, substitute teachers. This is our first reading of an updated substitute teacher policy.
So I think you all got it, but we took the mandatory policy and added that all applicants must have completed background checks through the Vermont Department of Public Safety, Vermont Crime Information Center, as well as Child Abuse and Adult Protective Service Registry. We do it already, it just wasn't spelled out in the policy, so now we've spelled that out in the policy. Let's see, we've also talked about adding to this policy that substitute teachers are selected to work at the sole discretion of the district, and that they're at will, and we can we reserve the right to designate substitute teachers as ineligible to work at any time for any reason. So those are the main additions to that.
I move that we adopt D6, substitute teachers. Oh, we can. Is that first reading?
That's first reading,
Oh,
because
okay.
there were some
I'm sorry.
changes on that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So we can actually put that on the agenda for warning,
adoption.
because we'll have 10 days, so I'll make sure that that gets on. We don't have to do 3 readings, apparently, though we've always done it. You only have to do 10-day warning. Correct. So we've had a discussion about it, so we can warn it. Yeah, something actually got easier. funny what happens when you go back and read the statutes carefully. Sometimes you are doing too much. So we have to do a 10-day warning, and that's all we need.
So I know this is just about policy, but I know on Brattleboro Town School Board, we're having conversations about substitute teachers and different ways of staffing and ensuring maybe permanent subs. And is that something that's on our agenda to talk about in the future, or how best to speak about that in a warned way?
I think that would be a great discussion to have and to inform the board, because we have all different ways we've done that, I'm pretty sure. So that would be a great thing to put on the agenda sometime in like late September, probably, I'm looking at now.
I want to do it before budget because it will impact budgets.
Thank you, Emily. I forgot about that. It was an important conversation.
Moving on. E, policy adoption. Their existing SU policies, let me just.
Are we warning these for the first time and then we talk about
No,
them?
this is the 10-day warning to adopt so that we have them for school. So this is just what we agreed upon early on was that we were going to implement these policies so we have policies. So if somebody wants to bring a rabid llama or a bat to school, apparently, rabid bat to school or something, that we have a policy about it. We need to start going through and making sure all our policies are harmonized and trying to work through the nitty-gritty, but we need something on August 28th. So that was our plan.
Yeah, I think I missed that meeting.
Yes,
Because there's at least one that I want to talk about, and then there's some other, well, this is my policies, and this is like from 10 years ago, and they're full of little things questions and things, so now's the time finally to talk about all that.
Well, so...
Not tonight.
Not tonight.
Not tonight. Unless you want to...
question I ever had.
It's only like 146 pages.
Are have modifications happened to these policies?
No, they're just the original SU policy.
We're saying we agree to these as a new school district.
It's not...
If there are changes that anybody wants from the board, then we'll pull that policy and put it back on for discussion.
Great, thanks.
Policies get reviewed regularly, as far as I know.
And we should probably be looking, especially where there's different policies, historically between schools, they should come to the top of the heap. And anything with more than 5 sticky notes in David Scholl's file should probably get some precedence.
Well, I didn't hear all of that, but the policy committee is going to be looking at them, so.
Policy committee, and if the board has input to policy committee, please send the policy committee the ones that you would like to be brought, and specifically your concerns, so that we can be informed or attend policy and amendment committee meeting. That would be excellent. So moving back to the action at hand, E, we have policies on the warning, A1, B1, B2, C4, C7, C8, C9, D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, D7, D9, D10, 11, 12, 14, 15, holy crow. E, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, F, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26. F, 28, 29, 30, 32, 33, 34. G1, G1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and H, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? All those, yes. Well, I'm sorry, is there board discussion? There appeared to be none. Tim, did you have a?
It's really minor. For like minor little corrections, should we just wait and bring up later?
Yes, I think we should, yeah. Any other board thoughts? Great, Tara.
Tara Castine, Putney. The committees that are going to meet and discuss and possibly change, add, or have comments about existing ones, which I understand for the point of time, agreeing what is in place is important. But going forward, when does the committee meet and when can people go to voice suggestions or changes that they would like to see within the policies? And this is a policy that encompasses the 10 schools within the district, regardless of what town you are from or what your policies were before. Is that correct?
More or less. We have some protocols that are individual to schools.
Like BUHS, I understand, has their own added stuff.
And I suspect EES will have different policies that we don't need in other schools because they report to a whole different group of laws. So Yes, for the most part, that is true. So that we have committee meetings, there's agendas posted for the committee meetings. I suspect it would be discussed in committee reports too, so you can read the minutes, and that would be coming through the committee, hearing from board members about issues, so you could write to the committees. The committee list, which we are just finalizing, is going to be posted on the website, so if you're interested in who the chair, well, we have to get committees to meet in order to get committee chairs, so the committee chair will be denoted, and there is a chair of the policy and amendment committee, that's me. So,
So you just tell me when you're meeting and I'll come.
so the agendas are warned, and we're
I'll
pretty
come.
good about doing it at least 48 hours in advance.
Thank you.
Chris, did we schedule another policy committee meeting?
We have not as
You
yet.
didn't, okay.
We did
And
not.
if you want to email one of us, and we'll make sure you
I
get a
shall
personal.
pay rapt attention to the website for when you guys meet.
Okay, that's great. I can't find anything on the website, but that's true everywhere.
I went on today and it was very nice.
Yes, thank you.
It changed a lot. It was, I think maybe I just refreshed.
No, it's,
But
no,
it
the,
looked very,
based
very
on our
well
last
organized.
meeting discussion, Lau went ahead and made those changes that we spoke about and made it much more clear, and we had a further discussion about how to make it even more clear, so we're getting there, we're getting there. Any further discussion on the motion on the table to approve all those policies? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of approving the aforementioned policies, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes have it. Congratulations, Lyle, you have policies.
You skipped pre-K partnership agreements.
Oh, I did not. Oh, because we did pre-K, and I was thinking pre-K, I had to skip down to Deb Gas.
So you've all done these before in your individual boards. It's all of the pre-K providers that any child in the Wyndham South Bay School District attends. So I can go through and read them all to you if you'd like. Brattleboro Center for Children, Early Ed Services, Horizon Early Learning, Hilltop Montessori, Mulberry Bush Independent School, the Grammar School, Little Red House, Saxon's River Montessori, Westby Nursery, Winston Prouty, Vernon Preschool, Neighborhood Schoolhouse, Timpson Hill Preschool. That's it. And it's the same as always.
And these are arrangements where 3- and 4-year-olds can attend private, or we'll just say private for the sake of Winston Prouty, can attend preschool for 10 hours, and they are reimbursed $3,200 from the school board. We get to count the students in our ADM. So as part of our funding formula, we receive $8,000 roughly. It's 0.46 of what our per pupil cost is, $18,000. So it's good for the school district, it's good for preschoolers. It's a win-win situation, and we have no place in our schools to put the preschoolers to take them in-house. All those in favor of approving the is there any further discussion on the pre-K partnerships or additional questions? Yes, David.
Just two things. We just started, this year was the first time the Brattleboro School District invited our partners in to do presentations, and it was a terrific addition to our programs and our understanding. I'm not recommending that we do that in the near future, but I would like to, on a soon-to-come agenda, talk about adding or inviting a representative of our partners to come and sit with us on the board. They wouldn't be a voting member, but to participate and share that pre-K perspective. And I hope that Deb will find a way to participate regularly too. But I just sort of formally do that sometime, and by the time the school year starts, get somebody to join us.
I was entertaining a motion. Oh, we didn't make a
No,
motion?
you can't make a vote.
See? Here's some comments.
So you need a motion?
I would entertain a motion that we approve the pre-K partnership agreements.
I move we approve the pre-K partnership agreements.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the pre-K partnership agreements, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes have it, the ayes do have it, the motion passes.
So they need chair and clerk's signature, so I don't know if you want to do it tonight, if you want to come to the office. I don't know.
Okay, I'm moving on to F. Can I move on to F? Somebody help me?
Just don't sign it natural gas.
So, by statute, we have to come to a regular meeting schedule time, and I just want to have a brief board discussion. Kelly's not here, and she's one that, so I'm going to table this because she has work commitments, so we are going as early as she can possibly make it. So, but I had heard from some people that Wednesday was not an excellent day, so I want to have a discussion next meeting about coming up with a regular, we had to do what we needed to do to get through the summer with people's vacation schedules and everything else, but by statute we have to have a regular meeting time and a regular meeting place so people know where to find us. So we need to look at that, but I don't want to do it without Kelly here.
Just for the interest of efficiency, Tuesday is impossible for me.
Okay.
So if you could maybe send out would you prefer Monday or Thursday? And see if we have a clear.
Or Wednesday. Maybe Wednesday's the day.
I thought you just said Wednesdays aren't good.
I heard from one person that Wednesday was not the optimal day.
Okay.
But I'm not. It may be that there's no other day that.
That's what I mean.
Being optimal versus being impossible are different terms.
Just want to make sure that we remember that Vernon meets second and fourth Mondays.
Second and fourth Monday?
Yeah. I would not want to meet on second and fourth.
You got it.
Can you all do a doodle poll?
Mondays would be.
I've done a doodle poll, but people didn't get back to me, and it took actually longer than just sitting in here and hammering out a day. So people didn't respond. I had to send out the doodle poll multiple times, and so I think it's just. So I've tried that, and it was not successful for me. So I'm going to try it with faces. That's mine.
If I could
Yes.
make a suggestion. Mondays has always historically worked out very well for me at the BUHS District 6.
I see.
So if we did it so that it didn't conflict with Vernon, that would be the best time for me. Thursdays is.
And Guilford used to meet Monday, so I suspect Kelly's.
Well, let's just have the full discussion and
yeah.
Yes.
So it's not about the days. So wait, you said we have to have a regular meeting location. What does that mean?
Yeah, the statute requires we have a regular meeting time and place. I don't know how we're going to manage that.
In Brattleboro, we did go from school to school, so I'm assuming it just means in a school.
Yeah.
The place is going to be one of our schools.
Yeah. I'm not an attorney, and that sounds good to me. So, but I do want to schedule a board retreat, and I guess we're going to have to do that without Kelly, because we're going to just need to move forward and figuring that out so we can talk. So we can look at mission, vision, working with committees who've kind of worked up an idea of what their committee is, but making sure that the board and the committee are on the same page about what a committee's charge is. And if you can't figure that out, we probably shouldn't have a committee for it. So, and we could use a few less committees, so, but we can't. So, so the 28th and 29th are two great days for our superintendent as we enter the very busy superintendent season to have, I'm thinking, a 3 or 4 hour big picture, no warrants, no nitty-gritty talk. We're talking about the big picture, the vision, and our mission.
And our statutory obligations.
And our statutory obligations.
Actually look at the statute, the duties of school boards.
Okay. Yes, 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 sorry. I thought you were saying that a retreat. It is. So, if you have your schedules, is the 28th, is there any day that's objectionable to anybody on the board at any time in the 28th and 29th? Or just that not work?
Are those weekdays?
Those are weekdays.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday and Thursday, the last of the month.
And this is during the day, during the workday?
So we're leaning towards, I believe Kelly can leave work a little bit early, so we might even, bring refreshments for people. So, maybe go into maybe like 3 to 6:30 or something like that, and have a sort of an early supper. It's kind of where we were leaning. So.
I would definitely check schedules, not my schedule.
Okay. You report to a higher authority, I understand.
Yes.
Children.
Wise woman.
So Tim is the only, if you want to, okay. So I will email Kelly.
Hear back from Tim.
And hear back from
I would ask for the 28th if we're voting.
Okay, well, we're not really voting, I'm just, if somebody can't make the 28th, then you're sort of, you don't have an objection, your preference is the 28th? That works? So,
That's the first day of school,
Actually, if I
doesn't
could
matter.
say it, I don't like eating meetings. It's just my personal preference.
What did you say?
He doesn't
I can't hear what you're saying.
He doesn't like
I don't
eating at
like
meetings.
eating at meetings.
Oh.
I'm there for the meeting, not the eating.
Well, if we meet at ES, it's different there.
What?
You don't
It's
have
more of
to-
a, it's not a school setting, it's different. You don't have to.
I don't.
Be that as it may, I think I'm in hour 5 of sitting in this room in a meeting now, and I would have loved to have a refreshment along the way. So, yeah, well, I should have brought water. I didn't really think it would go this late. So I'm going to check that out. Is there any other business before the board?
Or weren't we, sorry, was it YMCA?
Wisefire.
Wisefire, no, I'm
back to it? No.
No, we're gonna, because the board hasn't even, and we have to run through the process.
Just wanted to make
So
sure.
it's in the HERV stage, and then you sort of allow stage, and then we come to the board stage, so, and people haven't had a chance to read it on top of that, so.
I won't let you forget, don't worry.
So, being that there's no other business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:58. Thank you, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to take Thomas's second. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions, we are adjourning at 9:58.